That's right, I'm gonna be ranking absolutely every single Sonic game. Besides ports and collections, and well, actually there's quite a lot of lost media too, mostly mobile games. And LCD games, I have to draw the line at LCD games, I refuse to include them. Look, I'll have a more detailed list in the description, but otherwise, I'll be ranking 135 Sonic games in this video, which is by my count, effectively, every single officially released game. So prepare yourselves for the number one worst Sonic game of all time. The Sonic franchise had a rough transition into 3D. In fact, with the possible exception of Sonic 2, the franchise was never great to begin with, and that isn't shown any better than the 2006 title. Nah, just pulling your leg. Surely you wouldn't think I'd put 06 in last, right? Anyway, the worst game is Sonic X Speed Spotter, a spot the difference Sonic X Flash game, and I'm sure I don't have to explain why this is in last place. What I think happened here is that some company called Difference Games got the rights to a Sonic X episode, randomly pulled frames from it, and altered the images around a little, which makes for some really great pictures to look at, definitely. It really doesn't help that you have a short loop of Gotta Go Fast, the instrumental version, blaring in the background. Oh, and did I mention? They made 3 of these! 134. Sonic X Speed Spotter 3. The reason why the third game is up next is mostly the episode choice. They took screenshots from perhaps the most boring episode possible, the Robot Teacher episode. It does have a revamped hint system and some really nice particle effects, but that does not make up for the terrible imagery. 133. Sonic X Speed Spotter 2. Now the main reason this is the best of the trilogy is because they actually managed to get their hands on a better episode than the third game. There's some more interesting images to look at here, like the Sonic vs Knuckles fight, and while it may not have the pretty particle effects that 3 has, it does have the better hint system, so you know what, I'm done with these, let's move on. 132. Sonic Slider. This is a sliding puzzle flash game, with an image of Advance 2. I mean, it's not a bad picture or anything, but this is literally the entire game. No sound effects or music or anything, and it's just the one image. I mean, do people even like sliding puzzles? 131. Sonic the Broad Jump. So another flash game. The aim in this one is to make Sonic jump as far as possible, reaching upwards of even 10 kilometers. You have to time it correctly to get the most power and get a good angle, but that's it, that's literally it. There's nothing else to this game. It's better than the sliding puzzle though. 130. Sonic X Bowling. Another Sonic X Flash game, but this time centered around bowling, I guess. It's such a shallow and terrible game. It looks like the whole game's been drawn on MS Paint, and the gameplay entirely consists of timing the best arrow position to knock over PNG bowling pins. 129. Mini Toys. Now this is an interesting one, I guess. It's a collection of 6 little interactive flash things that were on the Sonic Channel website. You have a snow dome, an Eggman clock that doesn't make any sense, a Chao that throws a sign of Japanese text at your face, some random anime protagonist, and my personal favourite, Squishy Eggman. 128. Sonic X Ring Thing. This is a perplexing game to me. Your goal is to click on as many rings and Chaos Emeralds that float by as you can while avoiding the Eggman. But I don't really understand how you can't avoid Eggman, considering you're not really controlling anything. Just don't click on him. It's a very shallow game. There's nothing to really say about it though, other than mentioning the sublime soundtrack. 127. Sonic Night in Training. This game is absolutely hilarious. It's one of the numerous flash games Sega used to promote their upcoming actual games. It's definitely the worst out of them though. Your goal is to train Sonic by lining up your sword with apples that are being thrown at you. I mean, they couldn't have thought up a better game idea, or did they only have 3 hours to develop this from scratch? Either way, it's at complete odds with the tone and style of Black Knight, but hey, it's funny. 126. Sonic Bonus Game. This is a Flash game which released in the 90s, which is based on the special stages from 3D Blast. There's multiple levels to select, and you even have the option to remap controls, which is pretty advanced for an old Flash game. However, that all doesn't mean I can look past how awful this game is to play. You have to repeatedly press left or right to even move, which makes Sonic very hard to control, and makes the game pretty impossible to even beat. The screen is so compressed, it looks like someone ran this entire thing through a JPEGifier. It really looks and feels like it came from the 90s, so don't really come in with high expectations if you plan on playing this game, for whatever reason. 125. Shadow XS. Yes, this is an official Sonic game. It seriously looks like one of those shitty Flash games you'd see back in the 2000s. Actually, you know what? I take that back. There are so many better fan-made Sonic Flash games out there that saying that is an insult to them. It's just ridiculous that this is an actual, officially released Sonic game. Anyway, this game's pretty annoying to control, the momentum is all off and it's hard to make precise jumps. There's robot enemies about you can shoot, I guess, and your goal is to make it to a door or something and exit the level before the timer runs out, but that's it. 124. Sonic XS. The reason why this game is better than Shadow is mostly because of the visuals. The sky actually looks like a sky, the ground actually looks like ground, Sonic actually looks like Sonic. And on top of that, there's apparently a cheat system or something, but I do not care enough about this game to look into it. Otherwise, besides the difficulty being a tad bit easier, it's the same game as Shadow XS. So terrible, but pretty hilarious all the same. Moving on. 123. Sonic X Emerald Grab. This is just a Bejeweled clone. I really have nothing to say about this other than question what this has anything to do with Sonic X. 122. Sonic Flash Jigsaw Puzzles. In total, there were 27 entire Jigsaw Flash puzzle games that were released on the Sonic Channel website. I've decided to encompass this all under one game, but technically you could count this as 27 if you'd like. That said, my personal favourite is the Sonic Adventure 2 one. There's also an Advance 2 puzzle and 25 other Sonic characters to choose from. It's neat, but at the end of the day, they're just basic jigsaw puzzles. And they're very easy because the pieces just click into place automatically and there's no rotating pieces or anything like that. 121. Sonic Snake. This is literally just Snake. And I really don't know what this has anything to do with Sonic besides the background image. 120. Sonic X Snake. That's right, there's a second one. This time Sonic X related. This is the slightly better game because it has an animated intro, and you collect rings so it has some semblance of Sonic, and it's a little more challenging. 119. Sonic Chronicles Flash. Now, I was debating to myself whether or not you could even consider this a video game. I included it last second, but I'm still not certain, to be honest. It's mostly just an interactive menu. You control Sonic around and interact with other characters that give you information on the hit game, Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood. You can unlock wallpapers if you collect every ring in the 2 areas, but yeah, the only reason this game made it this high up on the list was the visuals. I guess they did a good job in replicating Chronicles in a Flash game. 118. Sonic Darts. This is the first mobile game to make this list. As with a lot of these older, smaller scale Java games, it was released through the long-gone Sonic Cafe service, and it's one of the few that were able to be salvaged. If you can say that. Honestly, it's alright. It's darts, I guess. Pretty boring even if the ROM worked, but yeah, darts. If I knew how to play darts, maybe I could get a kick out of this, but most of the enjoyment I got out of this game was the dialogue between Sonic and Shadow. Now you could say it's not really fair to rank this game considering it's a broken ROM, and to that I say, yeah, probably not. 117. Sega Sonic Popcorn Shop. As we just hit our first mobile game, our first arcade game immediately follows suit. Now I do think this game is also pretty unfair to rank when popcorn doesn't phase out of my monitor after playing this or whatever, but I can't help but immerse myself into the shoes of a Japanese child back in the 90s and stumbling upon a Sonic-themed popcorn machine. It would be an absolutely magical experience, life-changing even. Nowadays, not so much. The gameplay consists of choosing what popcorn you'll not get and spamming control. That said, even with the non-gameplay, I really like these charming and lively visuals and animations, not to mention the voice acting. Honestly, just the act of watching this game play out is more enjoyable than playing every game below this on my list, and honestly, probably a few above it as well. 116. Sonic Cricket. Another Java mobile game, this being a cricket-themed one. I do like some elements of this game. It's functional, and it's a game. You have multiple playable characters, the visuals are good, there's some alright animations, and characters have disconnected heads. At the end of the game, you get to see a summary of the ball tosses in 3D. But the catch? It's cricket. And honestly, good luck trying to find a more boring sport. 115. Sonic Fishing. Well, actually, I guess fishing is a sport, huh? That said, this game is fun, I guess. I mean, not really, but more fun than Sonic Cricket at least. You have music stripped out of Sonic Adventure, you can select a lure and have a little mini-game where you reel in a fish, and that's it really. 114. Sonic Tennis. Personally, I prefer tennis video games over fishing, cricket, and dart games, I guess, so while this game isn't exactly brimming with content, or is even good, I would still rather pick it up and play it over the previous ones. It's pretty simple and barely works honestly. I like the gradient on the grass. 113. Sonic Schoolhouse. This is actually the only PC exclusive Sonic game, funnily enough, if you ignore Flash games that is, but it doesn't really give PC a good rep because it's pretty bad. It controls terribly, it looks horrific like it could genuinely be a horror game at times, and the core gameplay consists of walking around a room, picking up numbers or letters or whatever, and bringing it back to a blackboard. Your reward for doing so? More shitty minigames, like memory, and collecting a few rings, and getting on a bus that insta-crashes the game. This game has the most content out of any game so far that I've done, which is why it's not in dead last. Plus, I do think there are some enjoyable factors, like the whole wacky vibe it's going for and the voice acting.
Hi there, I'm Sonic the Hedgehog.
But really, it's definitely not a game I recommend going through the effort of setting up, even for the memes. 112. Sonic Rivals Dash. This is a pretty basic platformer flash game. The only real goal is to get to the end of the level, but the twist is you can play multiplayer. It's a very unpolished game though. It's very rough around the edges for the standard of a Sega website flash game at least. It's also very short, 20 seconds tops, but I could imagine having a bit of fun with it with a friend back in the ancient caveman times of the mid-2000s. 111. Sonic Jam Gamecom. Our first console game, technically, on the Tiger Electronics Gamecom that I'm sure all of you have heard about. This is an absolute butchering of a small handful of zones from Sonic 2, 3, and Knuckles, and honestly, it's a pretty miserable experience. The music is extremely grating and makes your ears violently bleed out the moment you boot up the game. The few sound effects this game has makes it worse. The game is completely monochrome and very cramped and zoomed in. It's very slow and sluggish, running at about 2.5 frames per minute. And the gameplay is just horrific. As I said, it's very slow, but the physics, controls, well, pretty much everything about the gameplay is just wrong. I mean, it's more than just the gameplay. I can't point out to a single thing in this game that's even remotely praiseworthy. Though at the end of the day, it's still a complete 2D platform game, which puts it above everything else I've already ranked, I guess. 110. Sonic Heroes Puzzle. Ignoring the jank and general unpolish of this game, I would say this is a pretty solid puzzle game, all things considered. You have to match up rings, emeralds, and blocks with Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles respectively. It's nothing that crazy, nor really fun to be honest, but it's a pretty inoffensive game at the end of the day. 109. Sonic Chaos Crush. This was the Flash game to advertise for Sonic 06, and it's a Breakout or Arkanoid clone. It's pretty jank like the previous game. I feel like I don't really have proper control of the ball, and it can go all over the place sometimes. But there are some pretty cool power-ups that are tied to each of the 3 main hedgehogs that add a little bit of depth to this game. But yeah, it's just a Flash version of Breakout. 108. Sonic Boom Lincoln Smash. This is the most recent Flash game, which came out back in 2015 on Cartoon Network's website. It's surprisingly a reimagining of the Sonic Heroes puzzle game, but it's quite a bit better. It's more polished and plays better, and has better visuals. Plus this time it uses 5 characters instead of 3. There's also special moves that you can perform with each of the 5 characters that remove all of their respective blocks. 107. Sonic Spinball Flash. This is a pretty boring generic pinball game, which is sponsored by Lifesavers of all things. I guess if you're a pinball fan you may enjoy this, but even then there are numerous better pinball Sonic games out there, so I don't really see the point in playing this. Besides the novelty factor of playing a Lifesavers sponsored Sonic game, that is. 106. Sega Superstars Flash. This is a Flash game based on the Sonic minigame from the iToy PS2 Sega Superstars game, which is loosely based on the special stages from Sonic Heroes. Funnily enough, it probably plays better than the actual game, but we'll get back to that in a moment. There's difficulty selections, but other than that, there's not really much to this game, as with all Flash games really. It's just a matter of collecting rings and emeralds while avoiding obstacles. 105. Sonic Maze Craze. This is a maze-based Flash game used to promote the secret rings. You play as Sonic's shoes. No, this isn't a top-down representation of Sonic, you are literally playing as his shoes. It's not completely terrible, it reminds me of some of those old maze-based Flash games. It has an alright visual style I guess, but there's a lack of levels to play, and you have to listen to a 3-second song on loop. One of the better Flash games overall, but that's not really saying much. 104. Sonic Racing Kart. Another mobile game, and this one's a bit of fun. You have some dynamic music, which is pretty advanced for an old Java game. There's about 5 racetracks to choose from, and there's some enjoyment to be had with racing through them and getting the fastest times, I guess. 103. Mega Collection Plus Mini. A 2004 Flash game to advertise Sonic Mega Collection Plus. Mini is the right word for this though, because it's just one short level based on Green Hill Zone. It has visuals from Sonic 1, but the physics and gameplay is very restrictive, and the level design is different. However, it's a neat little recreation of Sonic 1 and one of the better Flash games out there. 102. Sonic Hopping. This is a mobile puzzle game where you play as Sonic on a pogo stick. Your goal is to collect all the rings in a stage without falling in a pitfall. It actually has some pretty good sprite work for a mobile game, and it can be quite satisfying to finish the levels. There's also quite a few of them to play through. 101. Sonic at the Olympic Games. The mobile version of the first Olympic Games game, to be specific, and it's a pretty simple minigame collection. There are 4 characters to play as and 5 different events. They have interesting twists on them, like the 1500 meters event where you have multiple branching pathways and loop-de-loops. You can control the javelin or discus in the air to collect as many rings as possible, but in the end it's really just a very basic minigame collection. 100. Waku Waku Sonic Patrol Car. This is a children's ride, but it's actually pretty well made, for what it is. It's the first Sonic game with voice acting, and it's pretty funny to hear classic Sonic talk this much. You control Sonic in a police car where you avoid other cars and can boost around. You can also fight against Eggman towards the end, and you're even given a ranking. It only lasts about a minute or 2, but I could imagine having fun with this in real life. If I were 5 years old, that is. 99. Sonic X Vapor. I never actually heard about this until making this video, but apparently Nike and Sega teamed up to do some collab in the past. It's an endless runner set in Green Hill Zone, but you play as Sonic wearing Nike shoes and kick soccer balls at enemies. It's actually a fun and pretty polished game for what it is, but at the end of the day it's just a glorified playable advertisement for Nike shoes. Now if it were Lifesavers on the other hand, this would be a masterpiece. 98. Sonic the Hedgehog Golf, a late 2000s Java mobile game, and honestly, I think it's pretty well made. It's definitely one of my favourites of the bunch of Java mobile games, and something I could see myself enjoying at the time. You can choose to play as either Sonic, Tails, or Knuckles, and the courses are set in 3 zones from Sonic 1, being Green Hill, Marble, and Spring Yard. It can be satisfying to aim for pars and collect rings and item boxes. You know, it's just a generally fun game and a really good use of the classic Sonic art style and sprites. 97. Sega Sonic Cosmo Fighter. Yet another children's ride, but this one's a bit better than the boring ass Sonic rides in a police car game. Now it's a space shooter. The sprite work, art, and animations look very clean for a children's ride, plus it has some neat cutscenes. There's voice acting of course, and you even get to fight against Eggman in a Grinch mech. But yeah, it's a very easy and mindless game, and short. 96. Wacky World's Creativity Studio. Finally, the first actual console game. Now I don't know if you could really call this a Sonic game, because outside of the box art and controlling Sonic in a UFO in the main menu, this game doesn't really have anything to do with Sonic. But the Sonic Wiki does go out of its way to say it's a part of the franchise, so I'll just go along with it. Not that it does the franchise any favours. In fact, it's hard to say this is even a video game in the first place. The entire game is just clicking on level environments and messing around the sprites by moving them around, changing their colours or deleting them, and adding in more sprites. Besides a convoluted interactive music player, that's the entire game. Just mess around with sprites. There's no rhyme or reason for anything. I guess it's supposed to promote creativity or something. Maybe it's supposed to be the Sonic version of Mario Paint, but that game does a much better job of encouraging creativity. It actually gives you some rudimentary tools to draw and paint images, or even make entire songs. Wacky Worlds on the other hand is a nothingness game. But maybe I'm just in the wrong demographic. 95. Shadow the Hedgehog Flash. This game slaps. It's a simple platformer where you get to play as Shadow with a gun and shoot other enemies. I mean yeah, the level design is pretty awful, but it's still fun for a Flash game. Once you finish the level, you transition into a shoot 'em up where you play as Shadow on his motorbike, and you even face off against bosses. Honestly, a really fun Flash game and easily one of my favourites. I could imagine having fun with this in the mid-2000s in anticipation for the actual Shadow game to come out. 94. Rush Adventure Flash. This is actually a surprisingly good Flash game. It's my favourite out of the bunch, and it's the very last Flash game. It's a recreation of the sailing from Rush Adventure, and it plays pretty much the exact same, with a whole DS and everything. It's pretty fun to do tricks off ramps and boost past all the obstacles. There's not much to it, but with what little there is, I think it's a pretty fun time to be had. 93. Tails and the Music Maker. This is the first of the 2 Sega Pico Sonic games, this being an educational music-based game. It goes through some music theory and other musical-related things through the form of minigames. The problem is, there aren't really that many minigames to begin with, and none of them are particularly fun to play. I really can't imagine it's a great way to even learn music anyway. Half of these minigames are just music-themed minigames, like a platforming level that has changing music, or a pinball machine that uses musical instruments. The few that do barely scratch the surface anyway, so this is a terrible educational game. The title of this game, Music Maker, is also misleading because you don't make any music. I guess there's an interactive piano, but it's really slow and you can't even use the black keys, so good luck making music with that. I guess there's a drawing mode, but it's not good enough to make up for the rest of this game. In the end, this is just a short collection of mediocre music-based minigames. Moving on. 92. Sonic Eraser. This is actually one of the very first Sonic games being exclusive to some online subscription thingy called the Sega Game Toshokan for the Mega Drive. Of course being Japanese only. It's kind of fun. It's a very basic puzzle game. I really like how whenever you do a combo, your Sonic beats up your opponent's Sonic. But yeah, there's nothing really else to this game, it's just a very basic puzzle game. 91. Shadow Shoot. Another Java mobile game. This is a pretty cool game. You control Shadow among different paths where you can speed up through ramps and spin dash into enemies and try to keep up a combo. The visuals are actually really good. It's comparable to the Advanced series even. It's cool seeing an official sprite version of Shadow. There's 8 different levels to play that all have different themes to them. The best part of the game has to be the bosses. At the very end you even fight off against Eggman. Of course, it's not an amazing game by any means. It's very slow, as well as restrictive, and there's not really any complexity to the gameplay, but it's definitely one of my favourite Java mobile Sonic games, and it needs a modern day reboot like the Sonic Jump series got. 90. Sonic Game World. This is the second Sega Pico game, and it's also mostly a collection of minigames. While they're all pretty basic, for Sega Pico standards they can be fun. I fail to see how this is even remotely an educational game though, I don't even feel like it's trying to be one. Anyway, you've got some variety here in the minigames. You can choose your character and interact with others in the areas. The final game is throwing around furniture to find emeralds or something. Overall, it's fine, but nothing I'd ever revisit. 89. Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. A combination of the adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog 90s cartoon series and Puyo Puyo. So already starting off on a bad foot there. I do like the dialogue and cutscenes. It's pretty animated for a Genesis game and it gives the game quite a bit of charm, alongside the really good presentation and style of this game. But I mean, it's Puyo Puyo. No one actually knows how to play Puyo Puyo, and the people who pretend to know are paid off by Sega. 88. Sonic Drift. This is the first Sonic racing game that was made, and I can't really say it started off strong, unfortunately. I do really like the use of Sonic 1 zones for this game. However, the gameplay itself is so basic and boring. The track design is very basic, and it's just speed up on straightaways and slow down and brake on turns. That's the entire game. There's a couple power-ups I guess too, but it's just not a fun game to play in my opinion. 87. Sonic Drift 2, which really did improve on the first game. There's a lot more variety in tracks here. You have zones from Sonic 2 and 3 in here, as well as a handful of new locations, so you're not just racing through the exact same track themes over and over again like the first game. The visuals here are pretty good too. The tracks have a lot more to them, like with more obstacles, walls, and gaps in the track that you have to jump over. There's also new characters to play as, like Fang and Metal Sonic, which are really nice inclusions. But yeah, it's still just the same basic gameplay in the end. 86. Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing Java. Another racing game, this time a Java mobile version of Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. The visuals are pretty good for an old phone game. There's use of 3D graphics here. The gameplay is pretty good compared to the Drift games too. There's an actual item system in this game and multiple playable characters, including unlockable ones. There's also a mission mode, but yeah, this is just a very basic mobile game. 85. Tails Sky Patrol. This is a shoot 'em up, or at least I think it is. I don't know what else you would call it. Perhaps a puzzle auto-scroller platformer game? Either way, it's a pretty difficult game for what it is. I had to use a lot of trial and error to get through this, mostly because you have to play in such a particular way. But it's an auto-scroller. If you even so much as touch a wall, you will instantly die, and these levels are designed like mazes. Plus your health bar is tied to your attack, which can get very frustrating. There are also so many bullshit moments here, like when random balls just populate the screen and you have no time to react to them. That said, I still had some fun with this game. It can be quite satisfying when you play it right. You can get into this fun rhythm. But yeah, I'd say the gameplay is fundamentally not very great. 84. Sonic Labyrinth. Conceptually, this is a pretty funny game. You play as Slow Sonic. That's the gimmick, and it sounds just as bad as it plays. You have to navigate through isometric maze-like levels to find a number of keys to progress, Sonic 3D Blast style. And I have to be honest, I hate that gameplay style. The only way to effectively move around is by spin dashing everywhere, and it becomes very stop and go. It's easy to get lost, especially in the last level, which is a complete mess of doors that place you in seemingly random places. Most of the levels feel like that though, disorienting messes, and just zipping across a map mindlessly looking around for keys. It's boring at best, and frustrating at worst. However, besides maybe the final level and a couple other pretty bad ones here and there, I actually didn't hate this game, at least for Game Gear standards. It's pretty polished and the visuals aren't bad at all, besides the seizure-inducing backgrounds that is. I like the bosses a lot too, and the ramp sections leading up to them. They feel like a reward for getting through the otherwise terrible levels. 83. Sonic Jump Fever, the first modern mobile game. Well, actually, it's been taken off the storefronts for a few years now, unfortunately, but it's actually the most recent Sonic Jump game. This is an endless runner reworking of the 2012 remake or reimagining of the original Java games, and I think it's the worst out of the bunch. It not being level based puts it at the bottom for me. I'd rather have a set of levels to play through and beat than try to go for high scores personally. The gameplay is more fun than the Java ones because it's modernized with more features and gimmicks and crap, plus you have multiple playable characters. However, there's not many zones, only being 4, and they cycle every few days anyway. The worst part is the awful microtransactions being a free-to-play game and all that. 82. Sonic Jump 2. This is the sequel to the very first game. In fact, it's pretty much identical. The same set of levels and bosses and gameplay and everything. I'm not really sure why this was a separate release, to be honest. It does have improved bosses and a boss theme, which is a plus over the original. However, it's removed the story, so there's no reason to play this one, honestly. I was considering putting this as the worst Sonic Jump game, but the microtransactions of Fever pushed that one down to the bottom for me. 81. Sonic Jump, the Java game and not the 2012 remake. This game has a story which features Sonic, Tails, Eggman and Knuckles, and is definitely the best part of it. It's very basic, it's just Sonic and friends chasing down Eggman to save the world from a brainwashing beam by going to South America and space. So yeah, you've got a set of 6 different zones to play through, all of which have full songs, which is very unexpected for a Java mobile game which usually can only handle like 3 seconds of music before going silent. On top of that, if you collect 50 rings in each stage, you'll receive a Chaos Emerald, and collecting all will unlock a 7th bonus zone. I mean, it's a pretty good game compared to most of the other Java mobile games, but really, in the end it's just a very boring Doodle Jump clone, and this goes for all of these games. I don't really like them. They're not original, nor challenging, nor really that fun. They're kinda just inoffensive, mindless mobile games. 80. Sonic Jump 2012 or Pro. This game does improve on the Java games a bit in terms of gameplay. It's overall more fun and flashy and satisfying to play. You've got modernized visuals and a slew of characters to choose from. Weirdly enough though, Shadow isn't playable, but Blaze Rouge and Silver are. This game also has a story. It's nowhere near as strong as the very first game. It's a collection of recycled comic strips with changing backgrounds, but the inclusion of a story mode and levels alone make it a lot more fun than Fever. 79. Sega Heroes. This is a basic match 3 addicting whatever mobile puzzle game, which also has its fair share of predatory monetary practices, as with most mobile games to be fair. But even then, I still prefer this over Mean Bean Machine as a puzzle game. The main reason it's so high up the list to the previous puzzle games is the massive amount of Sega fan service. And personally, I am a huge fan of Sega properties, not including Sonic. There are characters and levels from so many different Sega franchises like Super Monkey Ball, Jet Set Radio, Crazy Taxi, House of the Dead, Choo Choo Rocket, Yakuza, and of course our lord and saviour, Sonic the Hedgehog and his friends are here as well. I really like the cheesy interactions between the characters in the story mode, but that's really all the positives I can say about this game because it's otherwise just a Sega version of Candy Crush that's had its servers taken down for a while now. You know what, I only just realised now that this probably shouldn't be counted as a Sonic game. Well, I've already included all the other Sega Superstars games on this list too. It's too late, whatever. This is now officially a Sonic game. 78. Tails Adventure. This is an interesting game. It's a slow-paced, puzzle-based explorative platformer where you play as Tails. There are some pretty cool things about this game. You've got a lot of different items that you can find that all have different abilities, there's plenty of non-linear levels to play, and there's even a submarine. However, I really hate this game. I would argue the first half of this game or so is pretty good. It's designed in a way that you could probably still progress through levels without having to backtrack too much, but once you hit this halfway point, or perhaps even earlier, it's a nightmare. There are so many various, random, specific items that are hidden in such convoluted spots that are required to progress in this game. Either you're gonna have to spend 10 hours dedicated to searching every nook and cranny before finishing this game, or use a guide. Half of the levels are locked behind the submarine exploration, but the submarine area is a complete maze, and most of the areas are blocked off by set abilities that you'll have to find. The game is so slow. You can speed up by finding a specific item, but the game should be fast from the get-go. All the levels look pretty much identical and aren't really fun to play through. And you can only equip 4 items at a time. Even if you manage to find every item in the game, good luck even trying to figure out which ones you'll need to use, because you'll constantly hit walls in levels where you can't progress because you didn't select the super specific item that the game doesn't even try to explain to you what it does. And of course, in order to leave a level to even select your inventory items, you'll have to manually walk all the way back to the entrance to leave the level. This game is miserable to play. The game, while being pretty unique and interesting with fun ideas and moments, is completely ruined by its convoluted design. The only way to enjoy this game is if you were to use a guide, but even then it doesn't make up for the subpar gameplay, level design, and bland visuals. 77. Sega Sonic the Hedgehog. Unfortunately, this game isn't asked to properly emulate because it uses a trackball thingy, so I'm probably ranking this a little lower than I should, considering I didn't have much fun playing it because of the controls. And even if I had perfect controls, this game doesn't exactly have the most complex game design or anything. But with that said and done, this is actually a really great arcade game, especially for its time. I love the presentation and pixel art as well as the cinematics. It looks really clean. I love being able to play as not just Sonic, but Mighty and Ray, and all 3 of them are really expressive. Unfortunately, I can't really say I like the arcadey, simplistic and short design of this game though, which is why it's so low on my list. 76. Sonic Unleashed Mobile. This is easily my favourite Java mobile game, and it's a version of Sonic Unleashed. Yes, Unleashed actually has 3 versions, not 2. It's a massive downgrade of course, which is a shame, because I can't help but look at this and feel a little depressed that this wasn't a DS game in the Rush franchise, something like Colors DS but for Unleashed, but instead we get a shitty mobile version. The pixel art does look pretty cool. It's surreal seeing all these Unleashed set pieces being made in this art style, and this compressed music as well, but the game controls like ours, unsurprisingly. Regular Sonic is mostly alright and can be fun. While having some jank with platforming, it's mostly passable. Werehog on the other hand is where this game takes a nosedive and goes from somewhat fun to horrid to play through. The combat feels sluggish and the slow platforming is awful, especially when grappling onto hooks and ledges is the same button as doing a ground pound. Oh, and the bosses are just awful. The story is pretty funny because they seemingly just took lines from the script and shoved them into random places, even though it doesn't make any sense, like calling Mazuri Eggman Land, or Chip reacting to Sonic's normal form after already seeing him like that. Plus the developers didn't get the memo of the names of the locations, so you're canonically visiting Greece, Europe, and the Middle East. 75. Sonic Spinball. This is infamous for being the game that no one was able to beat the first level to, and I really don't blame them. I admittedly ended up using a guide to finish this game because you have to collect every single Chaos Emerald in a zone before moving on, and these aren't a matter of doing basic exploration. You have to do so much random, convoluted, unexplained crap to collect most of them, and the design of these levels are so chaotic. I admit I suck at pinball, but even so, how are you supposed to have precise control of Sonic if he's a pinball? Most of this game's playtime is repeatedly flipping Sonic up again and again because you keep missing the specific tunnel that you have to go through. It's not fun. Also, hot take, I actually really hate the music in this game. I know people like it, but it's ear-grating to me. I do like the visuals, and overall, it can be fun to just mess around in the levels. I like the text at the top, it can be funny. The bosses are fun too, but this is a game that I don't think I'll be revisiting anytime soon. 74. Sonic Blast. It's probably blasphemy to have this game so high up my rankings considering how much people hate it. And yeah, okay, I hate it too. A major complaint about this game is how slow and cramped it is, but I played the superior Brazilian exclusive Master System version, which is about 50 times more playable. At the end of the day, this game being a platformer makes it a lot more fun for me to play through than the other Game Gear games I ranked below this, but even so, it still has terrible gameplay, level design, and especially visuals. I mean, I'm sure I don't have to elaborate about the visuals. I mean, you're looking at the same game I am, but what do you really expect trying to replicate Donkey Kong Country on an 8-bit console? The level design is pretty gimmicky and unfun, as with all of these 8-bit games to be honest, but the slow gameplay just makes it so much worse here. 73. Sonic Jam Sonic World. I know I said I wasn't going to be including any re-releases or collections, but this game is different. I won't be ranking this based on Sonic 1, 2, 3 and Knuckles inclusions, but on the exclusive Sonic World. This is technically the first 3D Sonic platformer. 3D Blast absolutely does not count because it's on a 2D plane with no 3D elements whatsoever. It's pretty cool. You have various buildings to visit that have a lot of content like video clips and commercials, music, character profiles and a general picture gallery. There's also an obvious small world to roam around in and collect rings, and there's secrets to find that gives you hints like level selects. You can complete a number of missions such as collect all the rings, touch tails, and pop the balloons. It's nothing crazy, but I do really appreciate this little side mode and makes an otherwise pretty great collection of games that much better. Unfortunately, as much as I like this, I can't really rank this any higher. There just isn't really much to this. It's just one small level with a small amount of missions. 72. Sonic Forces Speed Battle. I'm sure a lot of you are shocked to see this game so low, but I honestly hate this game. It's easily my least favourite of the Dash trilogy, and the big reason for that is the multiplayer element. On paper it sounds like a great evolution of the Dash formula, face off against 3 other players in a race. In execution, it's the opposite of fun. There's no complexity to the gameplay, it's literally just pay to win. The higher level your character is, the stronger their abilities are. The gameplay itself is so bland too. Every match is the same exact thing. Avoid the obstacles and throw 50 items onto the track and hope that RNG was in your favour and win. Even if it were fun, there's an insane amount of lag, so it's not even really playable in the first place. The previous Dash games are a lot more fun to jump into and play. Obviously there's no lag, so it's a lot more polished, the gameplay is more varied, and the levels last a lot longer obviously because they're endless. The games are also more challenging as they procedurally get harder. I really just think it's a lot more fun to go for high scores than it is to wait a minute to get into a match that's laggy as fuck and lasts 2 minutes tops. Sure, there's a pretty great cast of characters here to play as, but it's locked behind one of the worst microtransaction system of any Sonic mobile game. And of course, you've got the whole Forces theming and music, which really makes everything that much worse because it's associated with another bad game. 71. Sonic Dash. I don't really have that much to say about this game honestly. I really just don't care for the endless run of Subway Surfer gameplay here, it's just not my cup of tea. I do like how over time a lot of new zones have been added into this game, but it's not going to improve an otherwise extremely boring endless runner game. I guess there's a couple bosses, but yeah, that's it. Moving on. 70. Sonic Dash 2, Sonic Boom. This is definitely my favourite Dash game of the trilogy, not that I like any of them to be honest. As I just said, the gameplay just does nothing for me. It's just not really that engaging or fun, but I really think 2 evolved on the first game's formula quite well. I like the combo system and it can be quite satisfying to keep up. The few characters included are all unique with specific abilities, and you can even change between characters during a game session. There's rail grinding and tethering. The visuals are also a lot better than the first game with unique level settings and no green hill. This also has by far the least aggressive microtransaction system in any Sonic mobile game. I was actually able to unlock all characters without paying a single cent. And on the note of characters, Vector was just recently added in, which is weird seeing Sega support a Sonic Boom related anything these days. I really hope Metal Sonic is added in and then the whole cast would be there. Actually, why am I even saying that? I do not care. 69. Sonic 3D Blast. Or should I say Sonic Labyrinth 2 because it's basically the same exact game, but a bit better I guess. The graphics are good, I like the style of the Saturn version, and the Genesis version is, well, I'd honestly say every other Sonic game on the system has better visuals, but it is impressive for its time. And the music is pretty good in both versions. But as I already said it before, I really hate this gameplay style. The gameplay is just bad. It feels sluggish and slippery and overall slow paced, like with Labyrinth. I feel like you can easily get caught on walls, turning is annoying and destroys your momentum, and it's pretty frustrating to control Sonic with a D-pad. The isometric design of this game can make it pretty hard to tell where Sonic is in relation to the ground or other enemies half the time. I'd say that's probably the main reason that it's not designed like a standard Sonic platformer game, because precise platforming with these controls and design would be pretty frustrating and unfair. So instead they made it worse by making this a boring fetch quest game where you have to collect like 15 flickies in each level. It's boring. This game is not engaging to me. I don't really understand where all the praise for this game has materialized from, because no matter how impressive it was for its time, or how good the visuals are, or how much you polish it up, the game design here is just bad. Having to slowly scan across these mazes of levels to find collectibles to progress is extremely repetitive and tedious. It doesn't help that every time you get hit or the stupid birds that follow you do, they get scattered across the map. Then you have to go back and fight with the controls to pick them up again. And it's not like Labyrinth where you only have 3 keys per level. You have to search a level, find 5 birds, bring them to a ring, then progress to the next area of the level 2 or 3 times until you can move on to the next level, which is the same exact thing. It's a really tedious gameplay loop. 68. Sonic 1 8-bit. I can't really call Sonic 1 a bad game by any means. I mean, at least for an 8-bit game. It can be fun to play through, and it has its moments. It's definitely a solid platformer for its time. That said, I'm not a huge fan of these 8-bit games, as I've already alluded to, and out of the bunch, this is easily my least favourite, if you don't count Blast. The level theming is something that I'm not too fond of. I like the final level, but half of the zones are stripped straight out of Sonic 1, one of which is Labyrinth Zone. And don't ask me how they did it, but they somehow managed to make it far worse than the original. The only other 2 zones are a generic jungle setting and Green Hill with bridges, the bridges of which make the game come to a crawl. The thing that kills this game is its awful level design. This game has an auto-scroller, 2 maze levels, and a punishing slow vertical level that has a death screen that follows you. These things should stay far away from Sonic games. On top of that, this game isn't even remotely fast. This is more of a generic platformer if anything, which isn't bad in its own right, but it doesn't make it a good Sonic game. And by extension, it makes this game a pretty forgettable platformer and relic of its time. 67. Sonic 2 8-bit. I would argue that this is a step up in quality compared to the first game, not by much, but a step up nonetheless. It actually has a complete set of brand new zones, which helps to make this game stand out as its own thing. And on top of that, the level themes themselves are pretty interesting and varied, notably Green Hills Zone. The level design for the most part is better than the first game, I don't recall as many bullshit moments, but that doesn't mean much considering how bad the first game was. Sonic 2 still has a prevalent amount of poor design and cheap gimmicks strewn throughout the entire game. I mean, just look at Scrambled Egg Zone. Holy crap, it's literally a trial and error maze through convoluted pipes. How can anyone look at this and call it fun? Well, actually a lot of people like these games apparently, so I guess I'm in the minority here. Moving on. 66. Sonic Runners Adventure. Personally, I feel like the Runners games are probably some of the better mobile games, mostly due to the gameplay. Runners Adventure is the weaker of the two, though it still does some things right. You've got worlds to play through, with level selects, so this isn't strictly an endless runner style game. You've got a story here, which is nothing remarkable honestly. The game is a one-time payment, which is a lot better than having microtransactions and ads. But really, this is a soulless cash grab version of the original Runners, which, well okay, that was definitely still a cash grab game, but it wasn't as soulless. A lot of the things I love about Runners was completely shat on here. There's no original music, it's all just stripped from other games, such as Green Hill Zone. And on the note of Green Hill Zone, of course it appears as a zone, because why wouldn't it? The aesthetics from the original Runners is gone here, and instead we have this disgusting visual style. The animations are awful, it looks like the characters are on a casual stroll, rather than actually, running. The backgrounds look pretty gross, the automated sections thrown in here and there break up the flow of the gameplay, and aren't even pleasing to watch because of the subpar visuals. In general, Runners had a lot more content. There were more events and story, way more zones and zone themes, a huge amount of buddies, not to mention the characters, which is very lackluster here. At the end of the day, this is just a poor man's Runners. 65. Sonic Runners. I have to be honest, I'm very conflicted with putting this game up so high, and the same goes for Runners Adventure. By all means, I should have this lower. It has simplistic, boring gameplay with a nothingness plot, a horrific implementation of microtransactions that turned a lot of people away from the game. But something about this game just clicks with me. I mean, while it's simplistic, the 2D platforming is just a lot more fun and satisfying than Subway Surfers or Doodle Jump, and it's a lot more respective to Sonic's actual design. I really like the art style, and the fan service was great. You had some crazy characters in here like Mephiles, and a lot of obscure buddies like Eraser Jin and Mother Wisp. And need I mention the soundtrack? This is honestly one of my favourite Sonic soundtracks of all time. It's definitely in my top 10. It's easily the best thing to come from this game. 64. Sonic Triple Trouble. I would say the general consensus is that this is the best out of the 8-bit games, but personally, I had a better time with Chaos. One reason is that Triple Trouble was a Game Gear exclusive, and in turn feels a lot more cramped and slow, and also maybe it's just the fatigue of playing 4 very similar games in a row. It just makes them all blend in together. Either way, there's definitely quite a bit to appreciate with this game compared to the first 2. I like the level variety, and overall the level design is a lot better. I don't recall as many BS moments, although don't let that make you think that the level design is good, because it's not. I do like the 3 antagonist gimmick of this game, even if there's not really much to it. In particular, I love the introduction of Fang the Sniper. This is pretty much the one and only time he appears in a non-spin-off game. 63. Sonic Chaos. Honestly, I think a big reason I'd say this is my favourite of the 8-bit Sonic games is mostly because it was the most tolerable to play through. It's the easiest of the bunch and doesn't have as many frustrating moments. While being relatively mindless, it's more enjoyable than treading around dated and terrible design and mechanics. The game has shorter levels than the others, but I think it makes it more fun. I prefer the overall design over most of the 8-bit games, mostly because it actually encourages going fast, which I know, crazy for a Sonic game to go fast, right? It's not perfect, of course, but it's definitely better than the other 8-bit games. You also get to play as Tails, which should be obvious from the Japanese title, but I think it's a great option. But in the end, I really still don't care for this game. In fact, all of these 8-bit games are just not well designed in my opinion. They all have very cheap gimmicks and mechanics, maze-like level design, awful slowdown, and even at their best, are just bland-ass platformers. 62. Imagine if you had a Mario Party game. Now imagine if there were no side modes or boards or anything, it was just mini-games. And there were only 24 of them, of which only 4 were decent. Wouldn't that sound like an absolutely terrible video game? Well, change the title to Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games for the Wii, because that's literally what this game is, except with Sonic characters, and the Olympics. Sure, I guess there's a couple side modes here and there, like the circuits, a small handful of missions, as well as the gallery mode stuff, but I swear, the only content in this game that I even remotely enjoyed was the dream events. And even then, only 2 of those I would consider to be good, being Dream Race and Dream Platform. I mean, the table tennis one isn't even that different from the standard event. So really, out of this entire game, the only enjoyment I got out of it was playing 2 short minigames, both of which are still not even up to the standard of Mario Party minigames. Every single event is an unfun waggle-fest that requires no thinking whatsoever. The visuals are pretty bad, the game takes place in the same 3 environments, so there's no excuse for that. This game is absolutely insulting. Think of the potential a Mario and Sonic crossover could have had, but instead we get a motion control minigame collection based on the Olympics, of all things. I absolutely despise this game. 61. Sonic Racing. This game is an Apple Arcade exclusive Sonic game, and it's based on Team Sonic Racing, with the same level environments, music, characters, etc., but it is a different game. It looks pretty good for a mobile game, and there's no ads or microtransactions, which is a definite plus. The gameplay is alright, each character has unique abilities which work with the team. It actually has more levels with an additional character compared to TSR, being Green Hill and Classic Sonic. Great choices, guys. But that's where the positives end, because otherwise, this game is terrible. This is kinda similar to Force's Speed Battle in the sense that you're forced to play against other people or bots, and that's it. There's no single player mode or Grand Prix or anything. And by far the absolute most insufferable thing about this game is that the courses are so basic. There's absolutely nothing to them. They're the same themes as Team Sonic Racing, but with extremely simplified and very mindless track design. Transformed back in 2014 had a fully fledged mobile port with identical level design and gameplay. Yeah, sure, it was a little downgraded of course, but Transformed has very complex track design. It has flying, and boats, and water physics, and trick systems, and everything. And this was on phones for free! Team Sonic Racing alone already has simplified courses compared to Transformed, and Sonic Racing can't even use those! This game is a paid game, $5 a month, for this piece of crap. There is nothing to this. There's nothing enjoyable about this game. 60. Sonic Pinball Party. I'll just state straight up that I'm not a pinball fan, which is why this is so low on my list, but if you were, I think you would have a great time with this game. The visuals are pretty good for a GBA game, there's a lot of detail and character to it, there's a lot of different levels to play on, and a lot of varying zone themes, plus levels based on nights and Samba de Amigo, which is pretty cool. The music is also great. There's a story mode in here as well, in which Eggman brainwashes characters to be evil, I guess. However, I didn't enjoy this game that much personally. It was fine up until the Metal Sonic match, but that match literally takes an hour. You have to play through every single zone, but it's all the same design and layout. So you're just doing the same thing over and over again, trying to get Eggman to spawn in and kill him. And if you die, you have to redo the entire thing from scratch, which may I repeat takes like an hour to do. It's just too repetitive for my liking. Samba de Amigo was cool though. 59. Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games DS. I'm sure a lot of you are shocked to the core that I put this game higher than the Wii version. But I mean, it's pretty obvious to me that this is the better game. It's not great, it definitely suffers the same problems, there's just not much to do here besides the minigames, of which aren't that fun. But the minigames are substantially better. They're not Wagglefest because they can't be. So in turn they feel a lot more arcadey and fun. Plus there's way more variety in this game. It doesn't have as many track and field events, but that's a good thing because that took up half of all the events in the Wii version. The DS version has a cycling event which is absent in the Wii version, and it's not even that bad. And also it has twice the amount of dream events, of which are a lot better than the Wii's. You've got Mario Kart Racing, Mario Kart Battle Mode, Punch Out, Monkey Target, House of the Dead. Hell, even the fencing mode is more fun than the Wii's. The only thing besides graphics that the Wii version has over the DS is probably just accessibility when it comes to playing it in multiplayer. 58. Sonic Freeriders. This game completely butchers everything great about the previous two Riders games. The adventure-style stories? Gone in favor of a fucking PowerPoint slideshow presentation, with writing that's the same quality as the mobile games, with the modern voice cast to boot, which just adds insult to injury. The unique futuristic art style and theming? Gone in favor of a more generic modern-day-esque Sonic style with brighter and more cartoony environments. The unique hoverboarding gameplay? Gone in favor of completely unresponsive Kinect gameplay. And even if it were functional, the level design is so simplistic and boring anyway. Because the racing is so shallow, the game had to be padded out with unfun missions like collecting rings or punching walls, which just makes it that much worse. And this isn't even mentioning the lack of modes, or the lack of Sega guest characters, which was a really cool inclusion in the previous games. The worst part of this game is that every time you think you're finally finished with the story, everyone has the audacity to agree to retry the match and just prolong the game even further. It's like Sonic Battle, except with shit gameplay. There are some positive elements here. The main theme is a banger and definitely my favourite Riders theme. There's some unique settings for levels, and I'm pretty sure this is one of the best Kinect games, sadly enough. But I'm kinda just grasping at straws to come up with any other good elements to say about this game, so let's just get on with it already. 57. Sega Superstars. This is a PS2 iToy game which has a collection of 12 minigames based on various Sega properties. Some of these are really cool. You have Space Channel 5 and Samba de Amigo rhythm games, a House of the Dead light gun game, and even a Virtua Fighter mode which is probably my favourite in the game. But unfortunately, there really isn't much content in this game. Most of the minigames are pretty short. Some are just bad, like the Crazy Taxi one, and some of them don't really work very well, honestly. It may be my iToy being super old, but I really couldn't get the Monkey Ball minigame to work well. Of course you have the Sonic level, otherwise it wouldn't be in this video. It's kinda based on the special stages from Heroes, or just the half-pipe special stages in the series in general. It's alright, I guess. It can be fun to avoid the spikes and collect the rings and Chaos Emeralds if it works. As I said, it can be a bit finicky for the game to even detect where you're holding your hand up for Sonic to follow, but if it works, it's a bit of fun. There's also a Chao Garden, but I didn't really delve into it. There's some enjoyment to be had with this game, but it's really just a small collection of minigames. Still better than most Kinect games though, including Freeriders. 56. Mario and Sonic at the London 2012 Olympic Games for Wii. This is pretty much just a straight upgrade to the original Wii version. No new characters were added in since the Winter Games, and most of the events are pretty much the same exact thing, albeit with slightly improved controls. There are a lot more events overall, and the visuals are a lot better. There's also multiple other modes, notably a party mode, which can be some fun. You even face off against a few unplayable characters like Jet, Rouge, Eggman Nega, and Omega, who should have all just been playable in the first place. While there are quite a few dream events, a lot of them aren't really that good. Yeah, it's cool to see all these locations like Grand Metropolis and Windy Valley, but most aren't really that fun compared to the crazy dream events in other games. Most are pretty gimmicky or flat out boring, like the Yoshi one. Honestly, they're not even that much better compared to the regular events. Dream Spacewalk is cool though. The lack of a single player mode or story mode really drags this game down too. So while it is a lot better than the first game, it's not like there was a high bar to pass. This is still a terrible Wagglefest minigame collection at the end of the day. 55. Sonic at the Olympic Games. This game is easily my favourite mobile Sonic game, and honestly it's a lot of fun for what it is. There's a story campaign in here. The soundtrack and visuals are really good. There's 16 different characters to play as, which are, to be fair, restricted to specific events. The events here, while not being that many, are really fun. Unironically, some of the best in the entire franchise. All of the events don't actually try to be realistic, which is how I wish the series was to begin with. The running events and hurdles are actually fast, and all of the events have their own fun twists to them, rather than just being generic mindless throw a Wii remote across a room. Look, yeah, it's still a very shallow mobile game, and there's no Mario, there's a lack of modes and events, there's no dream events, etc, etc, but for what it is, it's not bad at all. 54. Mario and Sonic at the London 2012 Olympic Games for the Nintendo 3DS. Okay, maybe I shouldn't be putting this one above the Wii version. Most of the events are worse, and there's no dream events. Plus, you can only play as a hand-selected choice of characters per each event. But the thing is, it has a fully fledged single-player story mode, and while it's not anything amazing, it's really fun to see all of these character interactions. There's plenty of meat on its bones too, with different branching stories and levels. It's not a 2-hour short playthrough like some of these games are. So yeah, while this game is mostly terrible, the pretty fun story mode makes up for it, and this is easily a game I'd rather play than the boring Wagglefest Wii version. 53. Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games for the 3DS. Sorry about ranking 4 of these games in a row, but they're all so similar to one another that it's hard to really spread them out. Unlike the 2012 3DS game, this one actually has fully fledged minigames, including a soccer and golf mode. Well, they aren't that fun, but they're quite extensive for the series. There aren't dream events, but in Fever there are plus events, which are kinda diet dream events. Some are pretty much the same exact thing as the normal events, whereas some are really remixed. So there's actually some good amount of variety here. The events overall are pretty average quality for the series, but they are pretty good for a handheld game, and better than all the previous Olympic games on this list. There's also a massive amount of characters to play as here, by far the most in the entire series, which is weird. You even have characters like Cream, which aren't playable anywhere else. And of course, there's a story mode. You get to explore around Rio. It's not great, honestly. In fact, I prefer the story mode to the 2012 version, but I mean, it exists and you can play it. 52. Sonic Rivals. The weird thing about this game is it doesn't look bad at all if you just watch gameplay of it online. It's only when you pick it up to play it when you realize how bad it is. I think the main reason is because it's designed with being a multiplayer game in mind. And yeah, I guess you could have fun with this in multiplayer, but the single player mode is really dragged down by this. All the characters travel at this really slow pace, there's no momentum, and the physics are overall clunky, like it doesn't really feel good to jump or do platforming. The level design can get super gimmicky, and there are so many slow, automated, scripted parts. Half the gameplay consists of jumping or dashing at the right time while holding right, and spamming items or homing attacks. There's pretty much no thought involved to the gameplay here. Not to mention how long a lot of these levels can get and how overall repetitive it can all be. I don't hate the bosses though, it's probably my favourite part of the game. The story is also pretty bad. Something about some magical camera that can turn anyone into photos or something. It also has the most abrupt ending, which made me think that there was some secret true ending or something that you unlocked if you beat all the stories, but there isn't. Though I do like how Silver was reintroduced back into the canon with this game. Although at the same time, Eggman Nega's inclusion creates this massive plot hole, but whatever. It's just a bland, weird story used to service the gameplay, Well, actually I say that, but half the time the characters compete against each other for no discernible reason. Overall, it's a very repetitive and unpolished racing platforming type game, and one that gets very tiring to play through after a few hours. 51. Sonic Rivals 2. This is pretty much a superior game to the first in every way. It has much better presentation and polish overall, there's a world map here, and a lot of variety to the levels that you can play. There's a huge amount of playable characters, all of whom for whatever reason have different stories to play through, even though they're all probably the same exact thing. The story is also better, especially with the voice acting, but it's still pretty forgettable. The main theme of this game, Race to Win, seems catchy at first until you realize it's only like 15 seconds long, and it's the background song to a couple levels, so good luck not getting completely sick of this song after playing this game. The thing is, this game doesn't really do anything to improve it from the first game in terms of gameplay. It's pretty much the exact same thing, and it has the exact same issues. So while being a massive improvement, it still has this super repetitive, boring gameplay style. 50. Sonic Shuffle. A Mario Party ripoff game developed by the people who developed Mario Party. What's really weird about this game is it has some story stripped straight out of Nights into Dreams in here, which absolutely conflicts with the gameplay, by the way. Everyone's teaming up to restore the gems and save the dream world by competing against each other in random mini-games. I'm sure if you played this game with friends you could have a blast with this game, maybe. Unfortunately, playing in single player is a drag, mostly because of the CPU and AI. The game is structured around cards, which isn't terrible in concept. Nah, I take that back. It's not really fun to have movement be based on a limited number of cards, and it's overcomplicated for what should otherwise be a simple party game. The CPUs end up targeting you and stealing all of your best cards, which makes you end up having to resort to blindly pulling theirs, which is especially not fun while having to traverse pretty chaotic board designs. And it's not just movement that's based on cards, you need them in order to gain precious stones, this game's equivalent of stars. Why it couldn't be as simple as just spending rings is beyond me. The minigames are alright, but the CPUs are gods in this game, which is frustrating when some of these control terribly and aren't exactly clear what you have to do. In order to beat the levels and progress, you can't just have the most precious stones. Oh no, you have to also consider winning the most minigames and collecting the most rings, which is pretty hard for a first playthrough. And the worst part about this is if you fail, you have to redo the entire board. That may not sound completely terrible, right? Well, think again, these levels easily last at least an hour or two. They are also so sluggish and slow. And what really doesn't help is that the minigames only pop up sporadically. They're not once a turn, so most of this time is spent finagling around with cards, which gets old very quickly. It's still a much better party game than most of the Olympic Games series though. 49. Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. Ignoring the whole impact this game and the Boom franchise in general had on the Sonic franchise, I can't really say I hate this game per se. It's just I can't really point to many things in this game that I like. I guess there's the level environments. There's actually some really unique settings here, towards the latter half of the game at least. And I feel like if this game wasn't tied to the Wii U, it could have had some really pretty set pieces. But that's honestly the only positive I have with this game, otherwise this is one of the most bland games I've ever played. It reeks of one of those bargain bin, generic PS2 era licensed action-adventure games, and it even looks like one. The gameplay is really bad. It's the most button-mashing, brain-dead, grindy combat. Every 3 seconds you stumble across enemy gauntlets that throw the same 3 enemies at you non-stop. It makes me fall asleep. The story is, there. I don't really hate the ideas, it's mostly the writing that I have issue with. It's nowhere near the quality of the TV show. It is especially painful to hear these characters go on and on about collecting rings and bouncing on bounce pads. And on the note of sound design, the music here is the most generic, forgettable orchestral music. Something that you'd see in a Western developed video game, not a Sonic game. Get that out of here. The rings in this game is not well thought out. Most of the game you're going to be capped at 100 rings, so there's no point at all in collecting them, but it's the most common collectible. The level design is repetitive and shallow. Each character has the same one mechanic that is copy and pasted across the entire game and barely ever developed upon. A quarter of this game is roaming around empty, lifeless overworlds. The second is playing through blocky, repetitive button-pushing level design. The third is the extremely repetitive and tiring combat and bosses. And the final quarter is playing through extremely jank speed sections that have less depth than the Dash games, that barely work. Obviously this game is super unpolished, but I'm sure you all know that by now. People love to bring up the fact that this game could have been good if it weren't rushed for the Wii U or whatever, and if it could have properly utilized the Cry engine. What we saw in the initial trailer was a fantastic game, and they should revisit this for PC as it would somehow magically manifest into a good game. This game is fundamentally bad. It has poor writing, poor mechanics, poor concepts, poor level design, poor music. All of this has absolutely nothing to do with the rush development or the mishaps with CryEngine compatibility with the Wii U. If this game was perfectly remastered for PC and had the original visions realized from the initial trailers and concept art, it would still suffer these fundamental issues. These issues of which arise from having a bad development team in the first place. And no matter how you look at it, this would still be a bad game. This isn't like 06 that has a good game buried somewhere underneath all of its shit. Rise of Lyric at its absolute best is the most generic-ass action-adventure game made even worse with its issues. 48. Mario and Sonic at the Sochi 2014 Winter Olympic Games. Blasphemy to put this game above the others, right? This is probably the most hated of the bunch, and don't get me wrong, I definitely see why people hate this game so much. It's just, I don't see why people don't hate the previous ones even more. Overall, the winter games and its events are so much more fun than the summer games. Most of them are pretty long and a lot more complex, at least relatively speaking. They're not 10-second sprints or anything. They usually involve sliding down slopes, but even the most basic ones still require more precision and thought than the average summer games. So yeah, I actually had some semblance of fun with these games. Insane, right? This is the first HD game of the bunch. I think it could have done a little better with the visuals, but it's definitely a much needed step up from the Wii games. There's also quite a bit of content. There's a story mode which is alright, and online play which is the first for the series. Plus these dream events are good. A lot are based on colours for some reason, but it's still pretty good. The controls I'm mixed on. It's great they finally introduced Wii Motion Plus, but it can get pretty annoying having to swap between the Wii remotes and Wii U gamepad in the middle of some events. No new characters were included here, which is a shame, and overall, this really feels like the most factory, pumped-out soulless sequel of the bunch. 47. Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games for Wii. This is a surprisingly good sequel to the first game. It improves on all of my issues and ends up being a somewhat solid party game. The visuals and presentation is a major step up in quality. 4 new playable characters were included, all of which are really nice inclusions. Unfortunately, no Rouge though. As I just said, the winter events in this game are actually fun, especially when they're translated to the dream events, which are all fantastic, relatively speaking. It's probably the best selection of dream events out of all the games in this entire franchise. Not just in the number of them, but also in quality. Because most of the events are sliding based, the dream events are all extensions of Mario Kart and racing basically, and the few non-racing events are also pretty good, like ice skating where you fight perfect chaos. In fact, the amount of references and fan service packed into this game is off the charts. There's even an event based on Sonic Chronicles of all things. There's also a shop and a basic single player mode, so yeah, it's definitely an improvement over the summer games. It's a shame that the games after this one didn't follow suit and continue to improve rather than going downhill, because for a while this was the peak of the franchise, which is weird for only being the second game. 46. Sonic and the Secret Rings. Okay, so if everything outside of the gameplay here was perfect, which it's not, I would still despise this game. The gameplay here is abysmal. I cannot stand it. and I'm willing to say that it's probably the worst gameplay to any Sonic game, well, 3D Sonic game. It's an auto-runner and motion control based game. You control Sonic by tilting and shaking the Wii Remote, which works 100% of the time. The overall movement is very stiff, charging up jumps doesn't feel natural, homing attacks barely work, the acceleration is extremely frustrating too. Either you're traveling at a snail's pace, or zooming across environments so fast you can't even tell what's going on. And there's no in between. Oh, and even attempting to move backwards is horrendous. Of course you have the ring system abilities, which I guess you could argue helps the gameplay, but I mean, no. The level design is very gimmicky and or automated, and if it's not, the gameplay itself isn't too complex, or it's not like these levels could be anything more than hallways half the time. The level design here is less involved than the Dash games. If I had to boil it down, it's just loosely veering Sonic left or right and jumping every now and then. Either that or sidling across ledges, which is an ingenious evolution of Sonic's speed-based gameplay, and totally not the worst parts of these games. The progression here makes me despise this game even further. It's kinda like if Sonic Colors had 25 acts per each zone instead of 6. There's only one good level per each world, and the rest of the levels are all just the exact same level design over and over again with stupid objectives. You don't have to finish them all to beat the game, but on the flip side, the game doesn't actually tell you what levels you need to finish in order to grab the world rings or whatever it is to finish the game. So without searching up exactly what you need to do, you're just gonna have to blindly choose levels and hope for the best. I could have probably tolerated this if the gameplay wasn't insufferable, because I would have chosen to play them anyway, but it is insufferable. So I don't really want to have my playtime be artificially extended. The less I play this, the better. The story is, I mean, you know what, I was about to say it was bad, but then I'm thinking about the last 10 years of Sonic games, and I'm reconsidering that. I guess it's not a strong story, but it definitely has its moments. The soundtrack is not bad, not my cup of tea, but I definitely respect it. And I guess there's some pretty solid visuals here, at least for a third-party Wii game. You have some really interesting environments in this Arabian Night setting, like pirates and dinosaurs. But I'm gonna be honest, they all kinda blend in together for me, and I'm not really huge on desert themes in video games in general, so it doesn't really appeal to me. 45. Sonic Boom Shattered Crystal. When I first played this game, I thought it was overhated. Not great, but still a bit of fun. Probably only looked down as much as it was because of its association with the Wii U game. But I could not be more wrong. This game is a nightmare to play through. It's not even that much better than Rise of Lyric. This game only has 8 levels. Each level is not well designed, they have bland visuals and music, and are mediocre at best. But the way this game goes about treating optional collectibles and their use for progression turns it from mediocre to absolutely atrocious. In order to finish this game, not 100%, just get to the credits, you need at least 30 emblems out of a total of 34. You might as well minus one of those because you get one for finishing the game. Which means that in the entire game you can only miss 3 emblems. And how exactly do you get emblems? You have to collect every single collectible of the same type, either blueprints or gems, of which there are about 5 to 6 in every level. So good luck not missing any of them. Keep in mind that at the absolute minimum, you have to complete and get every single collectible in 5 of the 8 levels. And even then, you would still need to get half of the collectibles in the remaining levels too. You're constantly hitting brick walls in this game and can't progress to the next level because you're missing an emblem or two, which forces you to replay older levels over and over again. Playing through the levels themselves is not fun when you know you're just going to be prevented from continuing afterwards. So instead of playing for fun, maybe going for the speed and ring coins, you have to slow down and explore these levels, of which are 10 minutes long. They don't encourage exploration, you can't backtrack 90% of the time, once you hit a boost panel you're screwed. The level design tricks you into thinking it's a standard get from point A to B Sonic game with all the spectacle and speed sections, but it is so misleading. This is a slow down and explore every nook and cranny in order to progress type of game, and it's not fun. It's excruciating padding. Fire and Ice doesn't do this, and in turn is a far better game. Shattered Crystal is a 2-hour game with 8 levels and 4 short bosses, but padded out to 8 hours of pain. 44. Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games for the Wii U. I don't hate this game honestly. I would say a major reason behind this is it doesn't feel like a shallow minigame collection, but something along the lines of a Mario Sports collection game. Soccer, rugby, and volleyball are all thought out large-scale events, and I mean, they're nowhere near as good as Mario Sports, but they are so much more fun to play than the shallow minigames of the series past. The remaining events are all also really fun to play because guess what? No more waggle controls, motion controls are optional, and on top of that, these events are so much more fast-paced and fun, such as characters actually being fast while racing. While there's no dream events, the duel events do make up for them. Guest characters are finally playable. It would be cool for them to be playable in any event, but them being playable is better than nothing and marks the first time since 2010 that new characters have been introduced to this series. There's also other modes, like a whole beach overworld to explore and a single player tournament mode thingy. The visuals are pretty good, much better than the 2014 game, and the soundtrack is really great. I mean, sure there's a lack of events overall, but the quality of them are so much higher than any of the previous games that this is the first game of this series that I could actually have fun picking up to play with. Well, maybe for a couple hours at most, but still. 43. Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games DS. This is definitely the best handheld Olympic games. This being a winter version really helps as these events are pretty good. Well, it's obviously a downgrade from the other winter games because it's a DS game, but it's probably the best selection of events for a handheld game. That said, the dream events, while being in abundance, aren't based on locations from Mario and Sonic, which is a shame. Anyway, the thing that really ties this together for me is the single player story mode. It's definitely the best of the handheld games. It's a story where Eggman and Bowser team up to steal the special snow spirits from Vancouver, and Mario and Sonic team up to stop them, or whatever. I mean, I know I said it was better than the other games, but that doesn't mean it's that good. Either way, you get to explore fictional towns and interact with a huge amount of Sonic and Mario characters. You get to recruit more and more as you progress, which allows you to explore more of the map. This really comes close to being what I imagine a proper Mario and Sonic crossover game could have been. Of course, the basis of everything you do is playing bad minigames, which is why I can't exactly call this a good game, but, nah, I have nothing else to say. 42. Lost World 3DS. This is Dimp's final Sonic game, and unfortunately they ended things off on a sour note with their worst game. This game tricks you at first. It makes you think it's actually a good game. The first 4 levels are genuinely great, and are very well done translations of the Wii U game to the 3DS. Windy Hill as a whole is great, and Zone 2 in particular is a fantastic level. It's probably better designed than most of the levels in the Wii U version, to be honest. However, immediately after Windy Hill, the game pulls a total 180, and literally every following level until the end of the game are complete abominations. It's that bad to the point where this is easily one of the worst 3D Sonic games. All the levels are far too long and are really dragged out with dreadful gimmicks, like rolling around in snowballs for 15 minutes, trying to kill 3 worm bosses that take 50 hits each, navigating through literal mazes, solving puzzles, pushing around fruit to make an elevator go up, countless enemy gauntlets. There are far too many things to list considering nearly every single level are like this. Unlike the Wii U version, wisps are mandatory. I do think the Ivory Wisp is fun to use, to be fair, but besides that, you're forced to use these gimmicky wisps constantly. The worst time is the entire level based around bowling a boulder with motion controls. The once in a blue moon you stumble across a level that isn't trying to be super gimmicky, they are terribly designed. They are 5 to 10 minutes too long and are absolute chaotic messes of designs. It's day and night compared to the beginning of this game, and I don't really know what went wrong here. There's a lack of any tube design levels in this game, which was one of my favourite things about the Wii U version. And to top that off, the controls feel very restrictive and gross compared to that game. I hate that this game is bad. I really wish I could like it. The presentation is great for a 3DS game. It's the only handheld 3D Sonic game, and there are a handful of really fun levels in here. But it's a very unenjoyable experience and a massive downgrade from the HD version. 41. Sonic Advance 3. This is easily the worst out of the Advance trilogy to me. I mean, yeah, there's definitely a lot here to appreciate. I love the partner system, mostly, and it definitely adds to replayability. Not that I'd ever want to replay this game. It's probably got the best soundtrack of the trilogy and presentation too. It's a sort of sequel to Battle, not that it really does anything with the story. And the overworlds in concept are pretty cool. In concept. But no amount of polish and features can improve the gameplay and especially level design. The physics in this game feels so off compared to the previous ones. There's very slow acceleration and I never feel like I could have proper control of Sonic while jumping. The level design, however, is the single factor which makes this game really unenjoyable to me. The first zone and a half are mostly fine, but the rest of the game is the epitome of Dimps design and is absolutely atrocious. There are a lot of bottomless pits which require precision platforming, speed sections that throw you into hazards like spikes, or crushing blocks that give you no chance to react. In fact, insta-death crushing blocks are everywhere in this game. There are so many stop and start gimmicks scattered throughout most levels, like having to randomly break walls to progress. There can be very annoying enemy placements, and generally speaking, the level design can get pretty confusing at times. Chaos Angel Act 3 is a 3-minute level of standing around waiting on a moving platform. Yeah, very fun. This is all tied together with having different hub worlds which are a pain to navigate around. Some are like mazes, and I really wish I could just simply jump into the next level without having to explore for 5 minutes. And there are 3 acts per zone, not including bosses, so that just helps to pad everything out. Special stages? People who say it was bad in Advance 2 have not played this game. Well, maybe it's not as bad, but it's still terrible here. You have to collect every single Chao in a zone, plus find a separate key to unlock the special stages. Sure, you could argue it increases replayability, but why anyone would want to replay this game is beyond me. But the ending of this game is actually pretty good, and it's locked behind a special stage system, so that's great. 40. Sonic Chronicles. The one and only Sonic RPG, and damn, I wish there were more to choose from. You'd think that a BioWare-developed Sonic RPG couldn't go wrong, but nearly everything about this game was a disaster. First, there's the obvious things like one of the worst soundtracks in the series, really terrible hand-drawn visuals which clash with the 3D models, annoying touchscreen controls and traversal through the levels with QuickTime events, atrocious sound design, terrible cutscenes, and a mess of a story that felt like a fanfiction, not to mention the cliffhanger ending, of course. In terms of gameplay, well, I'd say the battle system is pretty shite. I see a lot of people defend it, but I don't see it here. There's so many problems with it. For one, it's extremely slow. Even the most basic battles will drag on for minutes because of the slow-ass Osu touchscreen commands. Even fleeing from battles takes approximately half an hour each time. Also, I found that about 90% of enemies in this game either dodge half of your attacks, or if not, only take about 1 damage from every single attack, meaning that for a vast majority of this game, standard attacking is completely useless. I found that the only way to really play through this game is by spamming power attacks, which makes this game even slower, specifically armor-piercing types and also using cream to restore PP. Playing the game this way turns it from frustratingly bad to repetitive and boring, and still bad. but at least playable. There's also an elemental system that's absolutely never explained to you, and there's about 40 different characters to choose from, but half of them are shit and you can't experiment around with them anyway because you're forced to use Sonic the entire game. I could go on, but all I'll say is that the battle system is not well thought out or implemented at all. But I can't make myself hate this game. There's pretty much nothing I like about this game, but honestly, I still found it pretty enjoyable, solely for the fact that it's an RPG. Maybe it's something along the lines of having a bad RPG is better than having none at all. Anyway, now that Sega has Atlas under their belt, maybe it's about time to revisit the concept of a Sonic RPG. 39. Sonic the Fighters. I actually had quite a lot of fun with this game. It has a really great roster of Sonic characters, pretty much all the big ones at the time, including Fang. Plus Espio from Knuckles Chaotix and a couple other characters here too. You even fight off against Metal Sonic and Eggman in a mech at the very end. All of these fighters are really expressive, their movesets are really detailed with some really cool things you can pull off, like how you can spin dash as everyone. The various locations are really nice, and there's some classic locations that have been remade in 3D here, like South Island, Mushroom Hill, and Death Egg. Actually, I might be wrong, but I think this is the very first 3D Sonic game, and I really love these 3D character models and environments. I really love the art style personally. It's not the most advanced fighting game of all time or anything, but it's still a lot of fun for what it is and just makes me crave a more modern Sonic fighting game. 38. Sega Superstars Tennis. Personally, I'm a fan of the Mario Tennis series. It's my favorite Mario Sports spin-off franchise, and honestly, this game does not disappoint at all. In fact, it's probably better than most, if not all, Mario Tennis games, mostly due to the pretty chunky amount of fan service this game has for a lot of various Sega franchises. There's quite a lot represented here. There's a good selection of playable characters, including Sonic characters of course, all of which have special moves, and there's a lot of courts to choose from like Scrap Brain Zone. But the big selling point of this game is the single-player Superstar mode. There are a lot of Sega franchises to choose from here, and they all have their own set of challenges to complete. You have standard tennis matches and tournaments here, but on top of that there are a lot of mini-games to spice it up, like Puyo Puyo, light gun games in Virtua Cop, and even playing a tennis version of Space Harrier, just to mention a few. Even if you're not a huge fan of sports games, the amount of Sega references pumped in here makes it a treat to play through alone. 37. Sonic 4. More like Sonic Bore. Get it? Because it's boring? This game isn't as bad as most people make it out to be. For what it's worth, this is still a classic Sonic game in design, mostly. Well, not really, but there are some fun moments to be had here and there, and the gameplay isn't completely awful. To me it's pretty inoffensive, whereas die-hard Sonic fans despise this game. I mean, yeah, it doesn't really have much going for it. The music is pretty painful, the compositions are actually good. I mean, it's composed by Jun Senoue, but it's let down by the instrumentation. Sega has some weird fetish with using high-pitched, low-quality MIDI instrumentation in their music these days, as some way of replicating the Genesis sound font, even if it sounds absolutely nothing like it. Sonic Forces also does this. It's a shame because it ruins the entire soundtrack for me. The visuals are really gross. I think they actually improved them for the mobile version, but otherwise, everything has this really harsh cell shading style, and it really doesn't help that the zones are very generic and uninspired. On that note, there are only 4 zones. None of them are particularly well designed, most of the acts have stupid gimmicks dragging them down too. Casino Street is a pretty annoying zone with its cannonball and pinball crap. It's definitely my least favourite out of the bunch. And the elephant in the room, the physics and gameplay. It's bad. It's nothing like the original games, the momentum is non-existent, the acceleration of Sonic is painful, that on top of the homing attack as well as the level gimmicks, it makes me question what drugs they were taking when they thought they were making a spiritual successor to the classic games. But even with all of the bad, I don't hate this game, I have fun playing it. It's easily better than Advance 3 and all of the 8-bit games. Sure, it may not reach the same heights as the other classic games or even a sequel, but brushing this off as just a bad game is an unfair judgment. 36. Sonic 1. I'm gonna be honest, this game is really overrated, at least by casuals, because it really doesn't stand up, not just to modern games but to literally every other classic Sonic game. There's only like one good zone in the entire game, being Green Hill Zone, and I have to be honest, I hate Green Hill Zone. Every time I listen to the music and look at the visuals, I die a little on the inside. The other zones besides maybe Starlight are all terrible to play through. Marble Zone with its colours design and block pushing, Spring Yard Zone with its waiting around platforms for 20 minutes, Labyrinth Zone with its Labyrinth Zone, the Scrap Brain Zone with its Labyrinth Zone. The level design isn't really great nor fun to play through. It makes this game more of a standard platformer than one that's supposed to work with speed in mind. I can't help but look at the 2D Mario games and think they encourage speedrunning a lot more, honestly. I mean, yeah, okay, the physics are really good, the sprites and graphics are good for its time, it's a great concept, this is a game that kickstarted the franchise and so on, but this is also a game that I barely revisit because I don't really enjoy playing it that much. It's not a bad game, but there are far better 2D Sonic games out there that I'd much rather play. 35. Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, Tokyo 2020. Weird that they switched the title around, it doesn't roll off the tongue like it used to anymore. So I really hate that I like this game. I hate how I've ranked this game so high, but I have to be honest, I like this game. It's the only of the series that I would call a good game. And it's weird because I obviously have an unpopular opinion here, considering how poorly this game has been reviewed by fans and critics alike. But this is easily the best of the entire franchise to me. There are so many events here to play, all of which are actually fun. Motion controls are optional, of course, and following the 2016 version, they don't try to be super realistic or anything. They're fast-paced and snappy and, in turn, fun to play through. There are actual dream events this time. There are only 3, but 2 of them are really good. A racing minigame which kinda reminds me of Sonic Riders, which is set in Metropolis from Forces, and a fully blown shooting game. And on top of all of this, you've also got the retro events. The presentation is seriously fantastic for a Switch game, even PS4 levels at times. Most of the characters get unique costumes for a lot of the events, which I actually love, and the soundtrack is seriously amazing. The thing that ties us all together is its story mode. It's a fully blown 20 chapter long story with overworld exploration in both 2D and 3D, with plenty of minigames thrown within and heaps of character interactions. It's easily the best story of the entire franchise. But yeah, at the end of the day, as I've said with pretty much every single one of these games, it's still a very basic minigame collection, which is why it's not in the top 10 or whatever of this list. 34. Sonic Boom Fire and Ice. This is definitely the only good game out of the Boom trilogy. Well, it's a stretch to call it good, but it's not bad by any means. It's just a very bland and generic game overall. It doesn't face the same progression issues of Shadow Crystal, which is a godsend and makes this game actually enjoyable. And the fire and ice mechanic does add a little bit of depth to the gameplay, even if there's not really much to it. There's a lot more levels and variety to this game in general, and it has slightly better visuals and music too. Plus, the story here is probably the best of the 3 games. It actually has voiced cutscenes, and the writing isn't terrible. It's a lot more creative, original, and enjoyable than Shattered Crystal's story. But it's very easy. I guess looking back on Shattered Crystal, I didn't think that because of the forced exploration, but taking that away has ironically removed any form of challenge and turned this game into a very mindless experience, and that's not even mentioning the insane amount of automation this game has. I feel like you could probably beat most of this game blindfolded. The levels themselves all blend together and are all very forgettable. The only noticeable difference between the levels are the theming and visuals. None of them have interesting ideas or mechanics that make them stand out from one another. And that's the biggest issue I probably have with both of these 3DS games, is that they both feel very cheaply made. These levels aren't handcrafted, personalized designs, but copy-pasted blocky environments and randomly placed assets and mechanics. There's no depth or thought to any of the design in this game, or the previous one, and it just makes the whole package so forgettable. 33. Sonic CD. Honestly, I used to hate this game a lot. It was only until replaying it for this video that I had a change of heart. I still think it's very flawed and overrated and nowhere near the quality of 2, 3 and Knuckles, but I still think it can be quite good at times. The music's the best thing of this game, specifically the Japanese version, but even the US version has a couple good tracks, and I adore the animated cutscenes. The gameplay for the most part is the same as the classic games, but with the peel out, which is pretty cool, even if it's just a worse version of the spin dash. I feel like the gameplay alone is enough to make this as enjoyable as the other classic games at times. In fact, if you ignore Wacky Workbench, if you were to play through this game normally, just getting to the end of levels, this is not a bad game at all. There are some pretty cool zones and it's all very creative. I like the time travel mechanic, sort of. The bosses are interesting, well, mostly just Metal Sonic. The level design is kinda crazy though. It's very chaotic at times, like when springs shoot you backwards and all over the place, and spikes and enemies are placed everywhere, and Wacky Workbench. It's not just the level design that's chaotic, but it's the visuals as well. I have no idea what half of these zones are even trying to be. They're all cluttered messes of bright colours and have random objects just thrown around everywhere. My major problem with this game is the main mechanic, the time travel. It is so poorly implemented, I can't help but believe the level designers of this game didn't get the memo of the mechanic until the last few hours of development, so they just haphazardly threw together a few infinite spring running sections here and there and hoped that no one would complain. Ironically, the time travel mechanic would have actually worked in pretty much any other Sonic game, weirdly enough. It's the one time that they had cluttered level design that they decided to include a mechanic that involves speed. Honestly, good luck ever being able to activate the time travel in this game. You never get the chance to run around for long enough, let alone somehow know exactly where the switch to destroy is in every act in order to get the good ending. It's not really fun having to slow down, go to the past and explore these levels. I mean, to be fair, the time travel mechanic is kinda useless when you can just get the good ending by collecting the time stones, and the special stages are pretty fun anyway, so I kinda just treat time travel as a fun reward for maintaining speed, rather than a way of beating the game properly, I guess. All in all, if you ignore the pretty terrible level design, and the poor implementation of time travel, and a couple bad bosses, and Wacky Workbench, you've got a pretty good Sonic game on your hands. 32. Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing DS. You may be asking why I'm counting this separately as the console version, especially considering there's a few other versions of games that I didn't include, but I do think there are enough differences here to warrant counting this as a separate game. Most of the courses are the same, however the Samba de Amigo and Jet Set Radio courses are completely different designs, and the other tracks have small differences too, which definitely gives value to this game and a good reason to come back to play it. It has its own DS compressed soundtrack which I vibe with, and a slightly different roster of characters, plus a different set of missions. Oh, and the graphics are of course completely different. The most obvious point is the gameplay. It's definitely a downgrade, but it's fun when you get the hang of it. It's just very slippery. The way this game feels is very different from the console version, so I felt the need to rank it separately, but it's not like it does any favors considering it's obviously just a downgrade, it being a DS game and everything. But don't get me wrong, this is actually, besides maybe the slippery controls, a really good D-make, and as a DS game, a good racing game all around. 31. Sonic 4 Episode 2. As with a lot of Sonic sequels, this is definitely an improvement over the first. It's not a massive improvement, it still suffers the same gameplay issues like the restrictive controls and all that, and it is on the smaller side of course, only having a handful of zones, but this is definitely a decent game, and I really feel like it only has a soured reputation because of the first game. Visually, it's a lot better. Just graphically speaking, it doesn't look as cheap, The level environments here are also a lot more creative and varied, and there's not as many level gimmicks dragging them down, so the acts overall are much higher quality. The soundtrack is a lot better too, which I think may be an unpopular opinion, but there are some genuinely great tracks in here. You've got Tails here, which is really cool. The power-ups do slow down the game and destroys the flow every time you use them, but I still think they're fun. Unfortunately, you can't play as him outside multiplayer though. And of course, you have episode Metal Sonic, which is a really cool bonus episode. So really, I like this game quite a bit. It's not perfect of course, but it's definitely a game that I can jump into and have fun. And I'm still down to seeing Sonic 4 Episode 3, with Knuckles of course. 30. Sonic Battle. I feel pretty mixed about this game and I wish I didn't. I really wish I could love this game, but I just can't force myself to. The story here is pretty good. It's definitely one of the most extensive stories in a Sonic game at the point that it came out, and even to this day. It makes me crave more adventure and or RPG style games that could actually explore these characters. It's also a really high quality GBA game. It definitely has a lot more polish than the other GBA games, probably because it was developed by Sonic Team, when they were competent. And I really love the style and music. For the most part, the gameplay is pretty fun, albeit repetitive, but I love the concept a lot. A 3D arena battle fighting game featuring the Sonic cast, and it has a story-based single-player mode? Sign me up! However, the gameplay is pretty shallow, there's not really much to it, and the clunkiness of the 3D environments don't do much to help, as much as I like it visually. I like Emil in concept, but playing through him in the story early on is just not fun. It takes a while before you can upgrade him enough to be at the same standard as any other character. The worst thing by far, however, is the padding, and it really ruins the game. You have to play through nearly every single level at least twice. No difference, the literal same exact level, but a second time for no reason besides padding. And it gets so tiring. Cream's story is especially awful. You're just fighting the same exact robots over and over again, and her story wasn't even good to make up for it. And what really doesn't help is that for the number of levels that you have to play through, there just isn't enough enemy or character variety. 90% of the game is just fighting against Gamma and Emil clones, and it gets very old very fast. By the end of this game, I was just glad it was over. I'm sure this game would have been a lot more enjoyable if you play it in multiplayer, but good luck finding anyone willing to do that. In the end, this game just makes me wish we could have a well-made fighting game, or even a bad one. I don't care, I would eat anything up at this point. 29. Sonic Riders Zero Gravity. A lot of people hate this game. I don't really see it. I think the quality isn't really different enough from the first game to warrant calling this a bad game, in comparison at least. The gameplay is a bit of a downgrade. It's still fun, but it's a lot more simplistic and less skill-based. Ironically, I feel like them simplifying the mechanics has actually in turn overcomplicated everything. Sonic Riders 1 feels a lot more intuitive, and here it feels a lot more situational and restrictive. The leveling system is really annoying here. Shortcuts and abilities are locked behind collecting enough rings, whereas you could access any shortcut at any point in the previous game. The trick system doesn't feel as natural here because it's all done automatically. There's no boosting, and instead you have to use the gravity dive function, which you can really only do in specific areas the game wants you to use it in. The drifting is completely overhauled and can't really be used constantly, but I actually think I prefer this version. Honestly, I actually really like the zero gravity mechanic in general. It's pretty fun and allows for more movement options. I like how the music changes while using them. On the note of music, I do prefer the soundtrack here overall. I like the atmosphere and visuals a lot too, and the story is good. It's not as strong as the first game, but it's still good. Anyway, while this game is a bit of a downgrade, it's not that extreme of one. It's overall very similar to the first game, and to me I kind of view both of these Riders games to be very close in quality to one another. And speaking of the first game, 28. Sonic Riders. For being a spin-off racing game, there's actually quite an extensive story here, to the same scale as the adventure games even. There's way more to it than the modern games, funnily enough, and I actually really like it. I like the writing, concepts, and tone, as well as the characters. I like the Babylon Rogues a lot here. I think it's a pretty fun story. The gameplay here I'm mixed on. There's a lot more to the mechanics than a kart racer game. It's very skill-based in comparison. The trick system is flashy and cool. I definitely appreciate the design of the levels with the different branching pathways and routes you can take with the different character types. I love attacking other characters during races. Just generally in concept, the Extreme Gear gameplay is a lot more unique and interesting than a standard Mario Kart ripoff franchise, and it definitely suits the Sonic franchise a lot more. But the gameplay just doesn't really click with me. I appreciate the mechanics and gameplay, but I just don't like them personally. I think it's a bit too slippery and clunky to control. Controlling the boards, managing air, drifting around and all that doesn't feel as satisfying or fair than it does to race with the more standard karts in the Sega All-Stars games. Generally speaking, I just find those games a lot more fun to play. I still like this game though. I like the story and tone, I like the ideas, there's a lot of modes and features, you've even got Sega guest characters. So yeah, a good game overall, but the gameplay just doesn't click with me. 27. Sonic the Hedgehog Pocket Adventure. This is a weirdly good game, especially considering it was developed by SNK on an SNK console. Well, okay, to be fair, a lot of the development team afterwards formed DIMS, so I guess it's not that surprising in retrospect. But at the time, the handheld Sonic games were, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna say it, terrible. And then some non-Sega team comes together and makes a game to the same quality as the Genesis games. I don't blame IGN for giving this game a 10 out of 10 score. This really feels and plays as if it's one of the Genesis games crammed into a Neo Geo Pocket. It is just rehashing older zone themes, mostly from Sonic 2, and a lot of the level design elements are stripped from that game, but that's not really a bad thing considering its good level design. It's kinda like the 1999 version of Sonic Mania in a way. In fact, this is actually the first Sonic game to have Green Hill followed by Chemical Plant. Kinda. But that's the thing, as high quality as this game is, ultimately, I can't really rank this any higher. There's no reason to pick this up and play it over the classic games besides one, because it doesn't really have any original content, and it's just worse than 2, 3, and Knuckles, obviously because it's a small-scale handheld game, but it's definitely a very fun game, a great predecessor to the Advance series, and blows the other 8-bit games out of the water. 26. Sonic and the Black Knight. I didn't touch this game for years because of how much I hated the secret rings when I first played through it. I always dismissed this game because I thought it was a straight sequel with the same controls, same design, same overall quality. It was only until a few years ago that I gave this a fair shot and realized how much I really missed out on, because it is so much better. The obvious factor being, being able to actually control Sonic with an analog stick. Don't get me wrong, I still wouldn't really consider this to be a good game. Fundamentally, the whole game is built upon the foundation and design of Secret Rings, which is a terrible mess, so it's not like they could really do much to improve the formula without eventually hitting a wall. Most of the levels are super gimmicky or hallways that more or less just play themselves half the time. I feel like most of the standard levels can get very mindless. Just hold up on the analog stick and swing the Wii remote around like a madman, and you'll probably beat them. And on the note of motion controls, well, yeah, that. While you don't control Sonic with motion, you're still required to use it to swing the sword around, constantly, because it's the main gimmick of the game. While the controls are overall a lot more bearable than Secret Rings, it would be a stretch to claim that they are good. Honestly, the momentum and physics seem identical to Secret Rings, just now with an analog stick. That all said and done, there is so much here that is worth enjoying, and as I said, it improves on pretty much everything I hated about Secret Rings. Progression here is a lot better. There's a set clear order of levels to play through, so you aren't required to randomly select levels and hope for the best. The setting of Camelot is, well, at least in my opinion, a lot more appealing than the arid, deserty Arabian Night setting, and overall I really like the concepts in this game. I know people love to make fun of it, but I genuinely think that Sonic with a sword is cool. A big reason I appreciate this game a lot is that it's a last pre-meta era Sonic game, and it does so many things right that are completely absent in the modern games. Multiple playable characters, including Blaze, a story with a large scope and a darker, more serious tone, not to mention the god tier final boss with a Sonic form, Excalibur Sonic, of which is unironically one of the coolest things in this franchise. There's quite a bit about this game I can point to and gush about, but I don't want to give it the wrong image. I still don't think this is a good game. It's a massive improvement over Secret Rings, but it still doesn't compare to any of the mainline 3D Sonic games for me. The controls are very restrictive, and even if they weren't, it's not like this promotes complex gameplay when 90% of this game feels like scripted set pieces. The other great elements of this game isn't going to change that fact. But even so, I would kill to see what they could do with a third storybook game. 25. Team Sonic Racing. After years of waiting for the follow-up game for Transformed, getting this game was a gargantuan disappointment. A slap in the face, especially after Forces. Well, okay, to be fair, if this were a completely irredeemable game, it wouldn't be this high on the list. It still shares the same basic gameplay as Transformed, which I love personally. It is the biggest downgrade of all time, but if you look at this game in a vacuum, it can be fun. There's a story mode which is a plus over the previous racing games. Because it can focus on the larger Sonic cast, it comes close to justifying the lack of Sega characters. Close because the story itself isn't great. It's pretty much the same quality as the mobile games, or Free Riders. I appreciate it being here, but it could have been a lot better. Anyway, the amount of content in this game is absolutely ludicrous, and not in a good way. This game has a fraction of the content that Transformed had, and that game was 7 years older. This game only has a measly 15 characters, which is half the number Transformed had, and less than Sega All-Stars Racing and both Riders games. There are so many missing key Sonic characters here. It really needed at least one more team in the end, being Team Chaotix. That would have been the bare minimum to expect, but we couldn't even get that. Oh, but at least we get Zavok. The tracks in this game physically hurt me. 9 of the 21 tracks in this game, close to half of the entire selection, have been recycled from previous games. The 12 new tracks here are essentially 4, considering the zone themes are reused for 3 tracks each. Transformed, on the other hand, had 17 completely unique and original tracks, but all had better visuals, and were much more advanced in design. Most of Team Mid Racing's tracks are simplified and easy, such as most of them being pretty wide. The tracks in Transformed didn't just have more involved and challenging design, but it had dynamic tracks, and of course the transformation mechanic, which added a whole new level to kart racing. TSR, on the other hand, has static tracks, and its excuse for ditching the transform mechanic is its team mechanic, which 1, doesn't even begin to compare to the transformations, and 2, is completely broken and ruins the game. Instead of actually having fun racing and minding your own business, you're forced to keep 2 other CPU racers at the back of your mind the entire time, at least in single player, and by spamming the item trades you can break the team special meter and cheat nearly every single race anyway. It's not a well thought out system, and it's an insult to even insinuate that it substitutes for the transformed gameplay. Oh, and all the items are wisps, which I guess is more consistent than the random collection of items in Transformed, but honestly, I hate them. Mostly because the act of homogenizing all the items kinda makes them hard to even differentiate from one another. I feel like half of them do the exact same thing, and none of them require the same amount of skill that the items had in Transformed. The cherry on top of all of this is the lack of modes. I already mentioned the subpar story mode, and I guess there's a customization feature for the 3 people who care, but other than that, I guess you could race CPUs? There's no side modes like mission mode or battle mode, and I really doubt you'll be able to convince any sane people to play this with you. The online was dead on arrival because they released this game a month before Crash Team Racing for some brain dead reason, and then they continued to not support this game whatsoever after release because they're Sega. There is absolutely no reason to play this game when Transformed exists and is a fraction of the price, and actually has an online player base. Team Offline Racing is the most soulless, half-baked, bare-bones downgrade of a sequel that I've ever played, and makes me extremely depressed to think that this is the only game we've had since Forces. Over 4 years, and this is the only game. 24. Sonic Advance. I would argue that this is a pretty inoffensive game. It's an average game that I have no strong opinions on one way or another. It has mostly good level design. Well, it still has its fair share of dimps moments, but it's definitely nowhere near as bad as some of their other games. It's also nowhere near as good as the classic games, but it is the closest out of the Advance series, so there's that. The visuals are pretty average for a GBA game, the zones are kinda generic and the music is honestly forgettable. I really like having 4 playable characters here, it adds replayability, and I like the bosses. They're easily the best out of the Advance trilogy. To be honest, I was pretty close to putting this as my favourite Advance game, and I really do think it has the best level design of the bunch, but I really can't make myself put this above 2. It's such a bland game for me. It really doesn't stand on its own 2 feet or do anything that original. It's still a good game, but there's no reason I would choose to pick this up and play this over 2, 3, Knuckles, Mania, the Boost titles, or Advance 2. 23. Sonic Advance 2. A big reason this is my favourite out of the Advance trilogy is that it kinda feels like a predecessor to the Rush games, which I evidently prefer over the Advance trilogy. It doesn't have boosting or anything, but it's easily the fastest out of the trilogy. Building up speed over time is sort of like boosting, and you even have a trick system which is like a rudimentary version of the expanded trick system in Rush. The level design is a bit dimpsy here and there with quite a bit of bottomless pits, but on the other side, unlike Advance 3, it is 100% possible to play through the entirety of this game speedily, if you're good enough. A lot of the levels in this game are reactionary based, like having to jump at the right time to get to a higher ledge, which I actually don't hate. I totally understand why people may not like this type of design, but to me it feels rewarding to speed through these levels and a lot more fun and satisfying than Advance 3. This game has charm and it's very flashy unlike the first game. And also unlike the first game, this has some really interesting level themes like a musical instrument level and a gravity level. It also has a world map which is pretty neat. There's also an actual story this time around and it introduces Cream to the franchise, who is easy mode here because you can just cheese all the bosses. I'm sure no one's made that joke before. Oh, and on the topic of bosses, these bosses are stinky doo-doo and I hate them. They involve running, which is awful because if you get hit, you get sent to the left side of the screen, all your rings fly away, then you have to spend the next 15 seconds building up your speed just to get back to the boss again. It's pretty annoying having to simultaneously keep up your speed and dodge attacks. 22. Sonic Forces. More like Sonic Bosses. Oh wait, I already made that joke. This game physically hurts me, mostly for the fact that this is the only mainline Sonic game we've had in the past 8 years now, and it's really bad. So why do I have it this high up my list if I hate it so much? Well, I just happen to prefer 3D Sonic games over 2D ones, evidently. And if you've been paying attention, you would realize that this is my least favorite mainline 3D Sonic game. So while I hate this game, I'm naturally gonna skew the ranking towards the top. Even at its worst, unlike other games, it doesn't have awful motion control based movement, or level design that makes me want to die, or anything like that. And honestly, I don't know if I have a major brain lobe malfunctioning, but I can still have some moderate enjoyment with this game, at times, in a kinda turn my brain off kinda way. So yeah, as much as I hate this game, and as mid as it is, I don't actively hate it while playing it, as much as previous games on this list at least. Anyway, this game feels like a demo. The whole game. It's only 2 hours, and it really only gives you a very basic idea of what the gameplay could be. The levels are far too short for one, and there's a lack of levels. There's only 7 zones here, 3 of which are classic zones, which is infuriating. There are only 7 modern Sonic levels, which is 2 less than Generations, and are a fraction of the length, and an even smaller fraction of the quality. Sure, I guess there's a couple other level types here and bosses, but I can't stress enough that this game has less content than Gens, which need I mention is already on the short side. In terms of gameplay, it's very simple. Sonic's moveset has completely shrunk. Things like drifting, light speed dashes, wall jumps, etc. have been stripped out, and the few things that the game retained, like sliding and, jumping, it barely uses them because of how shallow the level design is. I guess some of the more advanced abilities have been given to the avatar, but the catch is the avatar controls really terribly. The acceleration and jumping just feels awful. Oh, and classic Sonic also controls really poorly. In fact, the gameplay here is just really bad, and even if a level design actually had anything to it, the game would have still been really unfun because of the awful controls. And yeah, the level design here is really bad and mindless. I think it's a stretch to call the previous Sonic Boost games Boost to Win, but honestly, pretty much every single level here is Boost to Win. There's no complexity to this level design, it is so basic and nothing. Most of this game is either automated sections, really easy platforming segments, or one-dimensional hallways to boost through and dash like a maniac. Even the best modern Sonic level here is less than a minute and still Boost to Win. I guess the shadow levels are alright because there's actual challenge to them, and I really wish we could have seen more levels to this standard. The avatar and tag team levels here are the best designed because they promote experimentation with branching pathways with the Wisp-Ons, but they're still only up to the standard of colors levels, and well, we'll get to that in a moment. And yeah, as I said, all the levels are really short too. If the levels in this game were 3 times longer, if not more, I honestly would have liked this game a lot more, but instead when you finally think you're getting started with a level, it ends. The art direction here is really bad. There's only 2 or 3 alright looking levels, but to think that this game was delayed for however long because of an update to an already existing lighting engine to eventually put out a game that looks worse than Unleashed in Generations is infuriating. I think the one major change this game desperately needed to make in order to have a good game was removing Classic Sonic in entirety. Think about it, Classic Sonic and everything involving him is the absolute worst part of this game. He controls terribly, the level design is awful, the music in those levels are ear-grating, and his inclusion in the story is so jarring and pisses me off on a personal level. Removing all of that could have resulted in a more refined and focused story that could have been more revolved around Sonic and OC's relationship, and the good levels in this game could have been at least 50% longer. But in the end, it just shits me that we waited 4 years for this game just for it to be lesser quality than Lost World, and we've been waiting an additional 5 years afterwards for the next game. These past few years have been probably the worst time in the franchise for Sonic fans of all time, and I'm gonna be real with you, this game has a massive part in that role. 21. Shadow the Hedgehog. I feel very mixed on this game. Spoiler for an upcoming game on my list, but I really love Sonic Adventure 2 and its story, and this game is the closest thing to a sequel we have of it. I know Shadow is a character that a lot of people point to and laugh at, but I'm gonna be real, it's very difficult for me to find anyone else in this franchise that has as much character development. And I unironically think that Shadow is the best written and most extensive Sonic character. This game, for what it's worth, does a really good job of exploring his character. I especially love revisiting the arc and expanding on his backstory with Maria. Saying this story is good is an extremely unpopular opinion, and yeah, okay, I admit the story here as a whole is a bit of a mess when you really dig into it, but if you look past the lack of a coherent story and the copious amount of edge, I think what's here is an underappreciated gem, at least compared to anything we've gotten recently. Anyway, moving from the story, I can't say the rest of this game is great at all. The controls are very slippery. It feels like Hero's controls, which, another spoiler, I'm not a fan of. But at least that game was designed with those loose controls in mind, by having larger environments to platform around, and of course having the flight and power characters to switch between. With Shadow, it just feels very cheap and unpolished to play, and it doesn't begin to compare to the adventure games. I do really like the triangle jump carried over from Heroes though, and to be honest, funnily enough, one of the biggest, if not the biggest complaints about this game being the weapons and gun system, I actually really like. I think it's fun to swap between different weapons during levels, and it makes combat a lot more fun than the other adventure era games. With the levels, there can be some pretty bad ones here. They can get very long, and especially because of the mission structure, which I'll get to in a second, they can feel very convoluted at times. However, I'd say for the most part, they're alright. It's not as strong as the adventure games, but there's some great level variety here. And now we get to the elephant in the room, the non-linear structure. I'll start with the positives. I think it's a great concept. It gives this game a lot of replay value, and it also plays around with the war theming a lot better than what's done in Forces. However, this is definitely the most major reason to why I'm not huge on this game. Playing through this game on the neutral route is fine. If you ignore the slippery, unpolished controls, just playing through most levels and just aiming to get to the end goal can be pretty fun. The problem is when you start to go through the different routes, when you realize you have to do the most asinine missions possible. A lot of these missions you have to complete can be very infuriating and are kinda like the Team Chaotix missions on steroids. For instance, half of the routes are locked behind killing every single enemy in a level. Then you realize the only way to get the final episode is by playing through every ending, of which requires 10 routes. And every time you have to play from the very beginning of the game, so good luck not getting completely sick of Westopolis before finishing this game. This game would have been about 30 times better if you could start any route from any level you've already beaten, and about 100 times better if the routes you took were determined not by completing random BS missions, but by the literal level route you take and having multiple endings to reach in every level instead. 20. Sonic Colors Wii. I'll start by getting the obvious out of the way. The story here is really bad. One of the worst Sonic stories in the entire franchise, and it kinda hurts even more to think this is what more or less kickstarted the meta era and the Pontac and Graph writing up until, what, Frontiers? 12 years later? The first act, maybe 2 of every zone, while not even being close to par with Gens or Unleashed, are alright and are definitely the best parts of this game, but the rest of the game is padded out with the most arse filler levels that reuse the same level environments and design, and a lot of these levels are just awful, like standing on buttons to rotate lasers or running around a short loop for a couple minutes straight. This also applies to the bosses, which are all recycled twice each. Only one of the 7 bosses here are passable, and it's the final boss, the only one that wasn't recycled. The rest are all really bad, and I hate playing them. This is a bad 3D Sonic game, if you can even call it one. A majority of the 3D sections here are extremely restrictive, like being limited to sidestepping or drifting. If not, it's usually just really basic booster wind segments. I would even go as far to argue that only about 5%, give or take, of this game is fully blown 3D. It's so rare here, I can really only point to about 2 substantial 3D areas in the entire game, being the end of Starlight Carnival Act 5 and the middle section of Aquarium Park Act 6. Now obviously a game doesn't have to be 3D to be good. A lot of my favourite Sonic games are 2D. But the problem is, the 3D sections in this game are the best parts. The 2D sections, which makes up a vast majority of this game, are very blocky, very slow, very gimmicky, very platforming and wisp heavy, and very automated. It's nowhere near the quality as fully blown 2D Sonic games like the Advance or Classic games, or 4, and it's by far the worst boost game in level design. Every other boost game has better 2D design and levels here, including Forces. I also have to mention how automated this game is. It's insane! It's especially bad in Starlight Carnival, where you're just sitting around waiting for minutes at a time for Sonic to just go into the boring interior 2D sections. Now, to have a blanket statement and claim that the entire game has bad level design is definitely an exaggeration. and it ignores the main mechanic of this game. The wisps here actually really elevate the level design, and it's something that I've only really come to appreciate over the past few years. Without using them, the levels here are some of the worst in the entire series, but if you just suck it up and use them, suddenly there is so much more complexity to the levels here. So many more routes and optional paths to take. So much more depth to the gameplay and design. I think this more detailed level design is the biggest reason to why I've ranked this up so high. But the catch is, the wisps aren't fun to use. I don't mind the laser wisp, but the rest are all a pain. I hate how people say Sonic Colors is a return to form Sonic game. Why do things like the multiple playstyles and characters, or gimmicks like the Werehog or Sword get so much flack, but wisps get a pass when they are arguably worse? The level environments here are actually pretty creative, and I do like them a lot, and the really good music helps with that. The visuals in general are phenomenal for a third-party Wii game, and even looks like a Nintendo-developed game. But the massive problem is, the abundance of 2D sections kinda defeats my whole praise for the visuals, because the 2D sections just look worse than the 3D sections. Starlight Carnival, for instance, looks beautiful on the outside, and it definitely reaches that potential in Sonic Transformed, but most of the zone is spent inside the awful industrial sections. It's especially awful with Planet Wisp's construction sites, and the same issue applies to both Asteroid Coaster and Aquarium Park. There is a lot to appreciate, but it also falls flat in a lot of areas, and I can't comprehend why this game is considered to be one of the best Sonic games. 19. Sonic Unleashed SD, or Unweashed. This is a completely inferior version to the HD game in pretty much every single way. For one, the graphics are worse, which should be pretty obvious, but it's to another level here. This game looks like trash, and with the exception of Mario and Sonic 1, this is easily the worst looking Wii Sonic game. A lot of the levels all blend together with muddy, gross color palettes and textures, and there's no atmosphere or spectacle like the superior HD version. Gameplay wise, it feels very cheap and gross. I hate the discrete boosting in bursts, and I'd much rather to have continuous boosting. I feel like I have less control of Sonic this way, and the control overall feels very cheap and nowhere near as refined as the HD version. The level design here isn't actually that bad, and it even rivals the HD version at points, but it's let down by the awful controls. The Werehog in this game is very overwhelming in comparison. There's a lot more night levels here compared to the HD version, and in proportion to the day levels here. I'd also argue they're a lot worse than the HD version. The gameplay, level design, and combat isn't anywhere as near as varied, and makes this game very slow and repetitive. I'm not one to instantly dismiss the Werehog as bad, unlike others, but it definitely drags this game down a lot for me, and I can't say that about the HD game. A perk this game has over the other is the Gaia Gate puzzle challenge rooms. I really enjoy them, but I would much rather have fully explorable hub worlds instead, because this game uses an interactive menu for them, which feels very cheap. Really, that's a good word to describe this game. Cheap. It's a cut-down budget version of Unleashed, and feels like a rush job afterthought to cash in on the Wii's user base. There's 2 entire countries cut out of this game. The gameplay and level design have all been stripped down. A lot of the polish and ideas are more or less missing here. I do not understand why this game got better reviews at the time, because this is worse in virtually every single way. That said, I like Unleashed a lot, and while this feels like the incomplete version, it still shares a lot of the elements that I like, and I also really like having a second version of this game. It's better than only getting one, and I hope Frontiers gets this same treatment with the Switch. 18. Knuckles Chaotix, an underrated gem. People hate the ring and tether mechanics here, but I actually think it's fun. Okay, well, maybe the gameplay doesn't have that much substance to it, but I enjoy just zipping across maps and bouncing all over the place. And of course you have the multiple playable characters, which is the best element of this game. You get to play as Vector, Espio, and Mighty, and not Sonic, which is nothing but an absolute win in my books. I don't actually mind the random levels and Crane character selection. It really keeps you on your toes and you never know what to expect next. I love the soundtrack here a lot. The art direction here is a bit weird with its color choices and crap, but technically speaking, the visuals here are really good. This being a 32-bit game definitely is the reason why, such as the sprites and pixel art, layers to the parallax scrolling, and of course, the 3D special stages, of which are great and are definitely my favorite out of all the classic games. In general, I'd say this is a really unique and interesting game, which really makes this stand out from the rest of the series. I think the only major issue I have is the lack of zones only being 5 and having 5 acts per zone. It can get a bit tiring to play through the same level themes over and over again, especially considering they aren't that distinct from one another in the first place. Oh, and Amazing Arena or whatever it's called with the button pushing. Yeah, that level blows. But I don't know, this is just a really fun game with a great atmosphere, nice visuals, cool roster of characters, fun gameplay. It's not good if you go by the textbook definition of good anyway, but I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy playing this game. 17. I'm sure you've all been eagerly waiting for this one. Sonic 06. Supposedly the worst game of all time, which is definitely an exaggeration. I'm glad this game is getting a lot more recognition in recent years because I feel like it can be very overlooked. When I first played through it a few years ago, I went in with the lowest possible expectations ever because why wouldn't you? And honestly, I came out pleasantly surprised. If I had to summarize my opinions on this game, it would be something along the lines of, this game quite literally takes absolutely everything that I could possibly want in a Sonic game and puts it all into one package, but unfortunately imploded on itself in trying to do so. If this game had a fully blown remake, it would easily be in my top 3. I'll start by getting the obvious out of the way. The soundtrack is absolutely incredible and easily one of the best of the series. Anyway, moving on. This has easily got to be by far the best structure of any 3D Sonic game. I love the multiple character episodes and the 3 Hedgehog stories occurring side by side with differing perspectives. All of the episodes have the same basic gameplay style as with all the playable characters, so there's no polarizing gameplay styles here. I would say the episodic formula peaked with this game. Of course, that's not even mentioning the robust cast of playable characters. This is the last time we've had this many, and I severely miss it. There's a total of 9 in this game, including Blaze, and they all typically play the same, which is how I wish the adventure games worked. Multiple playable characters without different play styles. The level design can be genuinely great. Well, not Silver's, but some of Shadow's and especially Sonic's have some excellent design. It's a lot more varied than SA2 for instance. There's plenty of branching pathways, a larger scale to the levels, of course a variety of characters to play as too. The speed sections would be great if they were functional, and I honestly don't mind the focus on combat at all. Yeah, okay, there's a lot of jank and automation. The combat is simple and repetitive, but it's nothing to scoff at, and it's definitely better than, I don't know, Colors and Forces? If you think I'm exaggerating, I highly implore you to give Sonic P06 a shot. The gameplay is the adventure style, which is personally my favorite style in the series. I love the hub worlds. In theory, how this game even has multiplayer. When was the last time you could point to a mainline game having multiplayer? I love the tone, style, and direction of the story. This is the last time in pretty much ever that we've gotten a large-scale, epic Sonic story. I love the darker and more serious tone, and there's some really great concepts here. I especially love Shadow's story and character. So with this all in mind, surely you're starting to understand why I love the direction of this game and why I can appreciate it so much. Okay, yes, shut up, I get it, this game is bad. I'm not going to ignore that. The 3 most severe issues you can point to are the long and frequent loading screens, general bugginess and lack of polish, and slowdown and performance. Taking away just those would have improved this game tenfold, but don't get me wrong, there's still a lot more crap here to unwrap. The visuals are very dull. I really dislike the realistic direction they took with this game, and it's aged terribly. No, in fact, it looked terrible for its time. Some of these environments, especially Soliana, look horrific, and looks like something you'd see from an asset flip game. The general gameplay is, for a lack of better words, complete stinky poopy doo-doo. Most of the characters, especially Amy, feel really bad to control. There's no momentum or even acceleration at points, and everyone travels really slowly. It all feels very cheap, and it's especially bad for a series that's supposed to have a focus on movement. The story is overall bad. I don't buy into Sonic's romance with Elise, and, well, I hate Elise overall. But the single thing that gets to me is the whole time travel element. It's so poorly implemented here and ruins a lot of the story for me. Mostly due to it kinda removing all of the stakes here. And of course, the plot holes it created. I kinda wish Silver was just from some future dimension or something rather than the actual future itself. But you know what I hate the most out of everything? This entire game. I hate this with a burning passion, and you know why? This is the game that single-handedly ended the adventure era of Sonic. It convinced Sega to distance themselves as far away as possible from this game and everything it stood for. And remember what I said at the start of this segment? That Sonic 06 is a combination of my favorite things of this franchise? Just let that sink in for a moment. Anyway, I really do love a lot about this game overall, but no, I'm not gonna deny it. I 100% think that Sonic 06 is a bad game. And take that as you will with how I feel about every game below this on my list. 16. Sonic R. I have to question something. Have I been mistaking a really great fan game for the actual Sonic R or something? Because everyone says that this game is bad, and I don't see it. I'm searching really hard to find where the bad is in this game, but I can't find it anywhere. This game unironically has one of the best video game soundtracks of all time. Every song is an absolute banger and makes this game go from great to masterpiece. Even if there's not many tracks here, it's easily in my top 5 Sonic OSTs, alongside Runners. I love the various level settings, and especially how they have changing weather and times. The gameplay here is really fun. You've got a quaint selection of characters to choose from, such as Metal Knuckles and Tails Doll. It's so much fun to explore these non-linear designed racetracks and find collectibles and Chaos Emeralds while still retaining first place. All of which leads up to the final level where you get to play as Super Sonic. And all in all, this is such a vibe of a game that I could jump into at any point of time and have an absolute blast with. The only singular minuscule problem that this game may potentially have is that it's way too short. There's only a couple hours of content here at most, with only 5 levels and a small handful of characters. And okay, yeah, the gameplay doesn't really have much substance to it or anything, so while I really love this game, let's be real, I'm probably pushing it by ranking it up this high. 15. Sonic Generations 3DS. Personally, I love the Rush trilogy a lot. I don't think Dimps has the best level designers, so I feel like their games kinda fall flat when they try to replicate the classic games. However, these 2D boost games are a lot more unique and stands out from every other 2D game, and I also think they can be very exhilarating and lots of fun overall. Definitely more so than the Advanced trilogy. Generations 3DS is the closest we've gotten to a 4th Rush game, although I don't think it reaches the same heights as the DS games. A lot of the levels are pretty basic and easy, and lean a little too far into the flashy automated segments for my liking. But don't get me wrong, this game can still be very fun at times. I really like the controls here, they feel very tight and a good translation of Generations to a handheld side-scroller, and it's fun to speedrun through these levels. However, there's a lack of content here unfortunately. There's 2 less main levels here than the HD version, and I don't think there's a justified reason for that. If anything, it would have been fair to expect more levels here, considering this game only has 2D levels, it reuses level design for the classic levels, and it doesn't even have any side content. Besides the boring copy-paste missions locked behind the play coins, that is. Also, I feel very mixed on the selection of zones here. I hate all of the classic zones, and that's even ignoring the fact that they've reused the same level design. I mean, I guess I can give a pass to Green Hill, but did we really have to get Casino Night and Mushroom Hill? Really, this game just has missed potential overall, especially considering the 3DS is the very last notable handheld console in general. This would have made a great swan song for the handheld Sonic series and could have celebrated all of what these games had to offer. My dream version of this game would have had 9 zones, split into 3 eras being the 8-bit games, Advanced Trilogy, and Rush Trilogy. To be fair, we actually did get Water Palace and Tropical Resort, but I wish the rest of the game was like that, instead of the tired classic zones we've seen a billion times, and more adventure levels. That said, besides the classic zones, with what's actually in this game, I really like it. Radical Highway and Water Palace are really great, and you've got the special stages from Heroes here. The bosses are also really cool, the best one being BioLizard. 14. Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. This game kinda feels like an uninspired generic Mario Kart ripoff, and unlike its sequel, it really doesn't do much to make it stand out from other kart racer games. That said, I'm overall a huge fan of kart races, so maybe that goes to explain why this is so high up on my list. I can look past the overall blandness of this game and find a really polished and fun kart racer here. There's also the whole Sega crossover element which I really dig and miss. We seriously haven't seen a Sega Superstars game in a decade now. Not to mention the mission mode here, which is pretty fun. Oh, and I do like the commentator here. My biggest issue with this game is probably just with how they went about the tracks. It's like Team Sonic Racing with how they used the same track theme for 3 tracks each. Well, okay, there's a lot more tracks here, but there's still a lack of visual variety. The Monkey Ball and, to a lesser extent, the Billy Hatcher levels are all different from one another, but all of the other tracks all blend into each other, particularly the Jet Set Radio tracks all kinda look the same. It's especially terrible with the Sonic levels, however. They're all based on Sonic Heroes, of which sucks. Or does it? Now, I don't mind Seaside Hill, but the Casino Night and Final Fortress tracks all kinda suck. And I really wish they could have used some other Sonic games rather than using 9 tracks based entirely on Heroes. But yeah, overall, a pretty solid kart racer crossover game. 13. Sonic 2. I don't like this game that much. Well, okay, for having it this high up on the list, of course I like it. It's a good game, don't take this the wrong way. But a lot of people claim that this is the best Sonic game, but I just don't see it. If you count 3 and Knuckles as separate games, I guess I can understand because it has more zones overall. But honestly, I still prefer just Sonic 3 and just Sonic and Knuckles separately over Sonic 2. The zones to me are pretty uninteresting thematically. Emerald Hill is just a slightly better Green Hill. Chemical Plant is ew. Aquatic Ruins is alright, I guess. Casino Night is ew. Hilltop is just Emerald Hill but worse. Mystic Cave is pretty good. Oil Ocean is ew. Metropolis is, oh my god, get that out of my face. And Sky Chase and Wing Fortress are alright, I guess. But it's also the level design. I don't think most of the acts here compare to the quality of Knuckles and especially 3. Metropolis Zone is the obvious one to point at here. It's a nightmare and it's not fun. And there's 3 acts, I hate it. And it's immediately followed by Sky Chase Zone, which is arguably worse. Death Egg Zone is probably one of the biggest difficulty jumps I've ever seen in a video game, and I can't imagine that many kids were even able to beat this game when it came out. So what I mean is that once you finish Oil Ocean Zone, you may as well just drop the rest of the game because the rest sucks. And Oil Ocean Zone sucks too, so you might as well pull that back to Mystic Cave. Oh, and would you look at that, that's the 6th zone. And, Sonic 3 has 6 zones. And they're all much better than Sonic 2's zones. See what I'm getting at here? I don't know, this game is fine I guess. It's much better designed than most of the 2D Sonic games out there, and it's still a moderately enjoyable game, which is why I can't rank this any lower. But this game just doesn't personally appeal to me. I don't like most of the zones, I don't like the music, I think the level design is at best not up to par with the following games, and at worst, kinda bad, especially in the latter half of the game. And also it has the worst special stages in all the classic games. This game was completely obliterated by 3 and Knuckles, and going back to it isn't really that great of an experience. 12. Sonic Rush Adventure. I would argue that this is easily the most underrated Sonic game. Not many people talk about it, and the few that do usually only bring up the bad elements like the grinding and whatever, but for the most part, this is a really great follow-up to Rush. Okay, well to be fair, it's not up to the same standard of Rush to me. Obviously, yeah, you've got the grinding with the materials and all that, which is a negative. Plus you've got the whole structure of the game being revolved around sailing and charting, kinda like Phantom Hourglass, with a kinda forgettable overarching story. I'm a little mixed, it all pads out this game unnecessarily. I can't say it makes it much fun for replayers to have to go through this slow story, replay levels to collect enough materials and sail everywhere. Even the special stages are sailing. But I definitely don't hate it. I still enjoy the story, especially with Blaze. I don't completely hate the sailing, I like the pirate theming and all the ideas of this game, and I think the whole package overall leads to a very unique Sonic game, and makes it a great change of pace from the rest of the series. The level design is probably the best of the Rush games. There aren't as many unfair moments, and it's overall a lot more consistent and enjoyable. I would say in turn it kinda makes it a little on the easy side of things, but it's still fun. And I don't know if this is a hot take, but I actually really like the bosses here a lot. They're very unique and creative. But I don't really find the level environments and visuals that appealing. Everything looks a lot more cheap. The levels aren't as vibrant and detailed. Everything kinda just looks a lot more flat, with more basic pixel art, if that makes any sense. It also has a worse soundtrack too, which all kinda leads to the presentation of this game being the weakest of this trilogy. This may be my least favorite of the Rush trilogy, but don't get me wrong, this is still a great game, and the fact that this is the worst just goes to show how good the trilogy is. 11. Sonic Lost World. I'm thinking to myself that this may be one of the most controversial rankings of mine, mostly because people hate this game and I don't. I mean, I get it, the obvious points being the plot being absolute trash, and the generic level theming, the overall argument that this is a terrible Sonic game. But here's the thing, the way I'm ranking these games isn't going by how much I think they succeed by being a good Sonic game, but how much I personally enjoy playing them. And you can take this as a bit of foreshadowing to the number 1 game, I guess. Anyway, yes, it's a bad Sonic game, but putting that to the side, it's a very solid 3D platformer. It's a quality polished game, and it being a ripoff of the Galaxy games alone makes this at worst decent, considering those games are masterpieces of course. But even with that aside, I genuinely think there is so much here that is completely overlooked, and even with its flaws and blemishes, this can be really great at times. For one, the music is outstanding. It's honestly one of my favorite Sonic soundtracks. 2, this is a lengthy game, at least compared to everything else in the meta era. There's even bonus DLC Yoshi and Zelda levels here. 3, the gameplay, specifically the parkour system, is really great. That and it is technically more akin to the adventure formula than Boost, which I prefer. The parkour system here I feel like is the perfect evolution of the adventure style. It works very well with the speed-based gameplay in mind. Running up on walls, while maybe not as satisfying as doing it naturally, is still really cool, and there are so many great tricks you can pull off here. This game can be very fun to speedrun, combining parkour and spin dashing. Plus there's even a playable Super Sonic here, which is, in my opinion, the best rendition of Super Sonic in any 3D Sonic game. I guess there's a run button for no reason, but it's not that big of an issue. People really like to blow it out of proportion. And finally, 4. The level design can be amazing at times, and this is where I feel like I'm going to lose a lot of you because this is a really unpopular opinion. First I'll say that unlike the 3DS version, I don't actually hate the gimmicky levels. I think they can be fun to some extent, and I really can't point out to that many levels, if at all, that I hate. The worst levels may not be that great, but they're nowhere near as bad as the lowest points in a majority of Sonic games, and I do find the quality of this game to be quite consistent. I absolutely love the tube design levels here, mostly in concept however. It's unfortunately not used very frequently, but I think it works so well. It works as a great transition of the classic level design to 3D. There are seamless branching pathways and layered level design that work to punish players without relying on bottomless pits. I mean, yeah, to be fair, this game barely explores or expands on its ideas or concepts. What I really just said was arguably theoretical because there are very few tube design levels in this game, and of the few that are here, none of them are particularly that advanced in design. I feel like this game is Sonic lost potential. It has fantastic concepts but never builds upon them. It has an amazing parkour and movement system, but barely allows you to experiment with them because of the overall restricted design, frequent springs, speed panels, and wisps even. That said, I still have heaps of fun with this game when I play it, and I do think this is a high quality game overall, which isn't something I can really say about many 3D Sonic games. I would love to see a sequel of this game that could explore its ideas, or if not, at least bring some of the parkour elements over to future games. 10. Sonic Colors DS. Don't ask me how, but this game, the handheld small budget side DIMPS game, has way more to it than the 3D main version, particularly in its story. Yeah, pretty much the entire main lineup of Sonic characters here, which really helps to fill out this world and setting which otherwise feels very empty and lifeless, at least in the Wii version with only having the cutscenes. These characters of which have fun dialogue, plus gives you side challenges to complete, of which is a much more fun way of padding out a game than forcing you to play through 6 very similar acts in a row. But it's not just that, this game expands on the whole Nega Wisp plot point, leading up to a proper supersonic final boss with Nega Mother Wisp. It's just weird because going from this game back to the Wii version makes it seem very limited in scope. But it's not just the story that's better here, it's, well, pretty much everything else. This is a rush game in design, so unlike the terrible 2D sections from the Wii version, the level design here is actually fun and speed-based. It's up to par with Rush and Rush Adventure. The only thing really holding it back is the Wisp system. They are quite frequent here. However, I didn't hate them as much as the Wii version. In fact, the Burst and Void Wisps, which are exclusive here, are pretty fun to use. The bosses here are a lot better than the Wii's, and there's even special stages. I also can't help but adore these environments and music tracks. I find them all very iconic from the Wii version, and seeing them all be downscaled into a 2D pixel art style is really cool. Yeah, okay, there's a fair share of annoying bits to the levels here and there, like the auto-scrolling section in Starlight Carnival, but honestly, putting that aside, this is a great game, and a great entry to the Rush series, if you count it as one. With flaws and all, this is a much better package than the Wii game. 9. Sonic Heroes. As a whole, this is a pretty fun game. I like it a lot, which goes to say it being in my top 10, of course, but it's very flawed, and I'll never forgive this game for essentially ditching the winning formula of the adventure games, which resulted in the series never returning to it. I kinda hate the gameplay here. Like, yes, on paper, having 12 different playable characters is really cool and everything, but the way they've all been smooshed into essentially 4 characters isn't great. It takes away from the freedom and abilities you used to have playing as them independently, because most of their abilities in this game have to incorporate the entire team, which is why I prefer Sonic 06's general gameplay structure over this. The power types have to use the 2 other characters to attack and glide, and I especially hate it with Vector and Big. The flight characters are probably the worst here, having to tower up. Platforming and flying around with them just feels pretty awful. And of course, the speed characters have been completely nerfed. The lack of a spin dash really limits movement options, and you've got the unpleasant controls. This game is very slippery, and there's a very high sensitivity to the controls. It doesn't really encourage any finesse with the movement. The adventure games are so much more tight to control. Maneuvering around, building up speed, the general momentum just feels so much more natural and fair. especially with the spin dash, but here you'll just be bouncing around everywhere with really loose and clunky controls, not to mention how awful the grind rails are. The story here is alright, but it's nothing special, it's pretty basic overall. It has some good moments here and there, and I like the final boss, but the story and general tone or style of this game is a definite step back from what I prefer in the adventure games. The levels are interesting enough, they're definitely more akin to the classic games by being super wacky and colourful and whatever, than trying to be super grounded. I think there's some good levels here, but the level design to me isn't as refined as the adventure games because of its focus on the character abilities and combat. And the levels can get super long at times, which can make them really drag on. That plus the 4 stories that are more or less identical to one another kinda makes this game very off-putting for me to 100%. As a matter of fact, alongside Shadow, these are the only mainline Sonic games I have yet to complete. Now you may be asking, isn't this your 9th favourite Sonic game? You've just been completely ripping into this the entire time. You do like this game, right? And to that I say, 8. Sonic Rush. Okay, so as I said before, the Rush games click with me a lot, and besides the classic games, these are easily my favourite 2D Sonic games. The first Rush game of which takes the cake for the best of the series and is easily one of my favourite 2D Sonic games of all time. The major reason behind this is that this game is pure Rush gameplay. There's no gimmicks or any BS dragging it down, it's unadulterated boosting gameplay. No sailing, no wisps, no classic Sonic, just boost. The gameplay is super fun, energetic and satisfying. I love the trick system and keeping up the boost gauge. It's also kinda challenging all around, which I love to see in a game. Yeah, okay, I admit, there's a fair share of bottomless pits and dimps crap here, especially in some of the later levels, which can get a little unfair, especially for a game that's supposed to be super fast paced. But I still really enjoy playing this game. I can look past the dimps moments here unlike the advanced games in 4 because of how fun I find the gameplay and how much I like the style. The levels here are very vibrant and colourful, at least compared to its sequels, not to mention the ample style this game has, with all of its spectacle and level mechanics and spanning across the 2 screens. All of this is even further tied together by having this soundtrack which is absolute perfection and easily one of the best in the series. And of course, I have to mention the introduction of one of the best Sonic characters in the series, Blaze. I love her as a secondary playable character, and I especially love her boss fight. It's one of the most memorable boss fights in the series to me. I really wish Sega did more with her character in the past decade. This is definitely one of my favourite Sonic games of all time, which should be obvious because this is a ranking video after all, but it goes to show how Dimps isn't the all-around terrible developers that everyone makes him out to be. It's a shame that they've been silent on the Sonic front since Lost World, and I'd love to see them return to the series someday down the line. 7. Sonic Adventure 2. This should be very obvious by this point, but I really love the adventure games, and in a way I feel like the 3D games peaked at the very beginning. While this game doesn't reach the same heights as the first game, which I'll elaborate on in a second, this is still a fantastic game, mostly because it retains the same gameplay for the speed levels. I prefer the adventure style gameplay over boost because I feel like it gives a lot more potential to the level design, and it makes these games feel a lot more open. I also just prefer 3D gameplay overall. The boost games feel very restrictive in comparison, not that I don't like them, but the adventure style that's present here is just a lot more enjoyable to me, even if the level design isn't necessarily better. SA2 has this higher quality gameplay of which is really only present in 2 games. All of the following games up until 06 for whatever reason have really bad controls, but this game doesn't. I love the momentum, the spin dash, the tight controls, it's just very refreshing from the rest of the series. I also think the story here is by far the best in the series. It does a great job of packing a lot of details and plot beats. It of course introduces Shadow and Rouge, which are 2 of the best Sonic characters. In general, I love the Dark Team giving the evil perspective on the story, and it all culminating to the climax of the last story. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you, I feel very mixed on this game as a whole, to the point where if you boil down every individual element here, I kinda hate nearly all of them. I'm gonna take the form of a journalist for a moment and say I actually really hate Sonic's friends here. Unlike SA1, I feel like the multiple playstyles really ruin this game for me. The mech sections aren't completely irredeemable. They follow the same basic structure of getting to the end of the level, and it can be fun going for A ranks with the combos, but these levels are very slow, and the controls feel very clunky, which is weird considering they knocked it out of the park with Gamma. It's a complete downgrade here. The treasure hunting levels, however, are complete torture and are easily the worst part of this game. The defense I see for these levels is something along the lines of, they aren't that difficult and shouldn't take you too long if you use the hints or whatever, but that fails to tackle the massive issue that is, these levels are not fun to play. It's not fun to slowly scan across massive environments for one random collectible at a time with convoluted hints, of which you can't even use if you're going for A ranks anyway. Claiming that it's not as difficult as people make it out to be doesn't somehow make it fun. Now you may be expecting me to say something along the lines of, while 2/3 of this game is bad, the remaining third speed sections are fantastic. But no, they are the best part of this game, but I actually don't like them that much. I like the gameplay, but the level design for the most part is far too linear and straightforward. A lot of the levels just feel like glorified hallways. The boost games honestly feel less linear to me. The best and most open levels here are the grind rail levels, but the grinding system in this game is borderline broken, so it's hard for me to say these levels are even good. And let me just reiterate that these speed levels, the best and only good part of this game is at most only 1/3 of this entire game. The only other substantial mode here, besides multiplayer, is the Chao Garden, but I absolutely despise it because there's absolutely nothing to it whatsoever that could be defined as fun. It's a glorified Tamagotchi, and the only two modes here just play themselves. All I view this terrible mode to be is a roadblock in the way of unlocking Green Hill, a 50-hour minimum of grinding up Chao's roadblock. But don't get me wrong, it might sound like I hate all of this game, but as a complete package, it's easily one of my favorite games of this franchise, to the point where I even 100%ed it twice, not including the Chaos. It has a lot of great elements, it's very polished, relatively speaking, with good gameplay, bosses, and a great story. Overall, it's a quality follow-up to Adventure, which alone justifies this game being so high up on this list, but it's heavily let down by the differing playstyles and simplified level design. 6. Sonic Mania. This game is the peak of classic Sonic design. The team did a fantastic job of really analysing what made the classic design so good and perfected it here. All the levels here are extremely well designed and very fun to play through. This has done the unthinkable and actually made Sonic CD levels fun. I love how the Act 1s are very respective to the original game, and then the second acts go balls to the walls with so many insane ideas and mechanics. In general, this game is jam-packed with so many creative ideas, not to mention how detailed every level is, not just in terms of the great pixel art and visuals, and also of its plentiful references and Easter eggs to older Sonic games. The bosses here are all very fun to play, and the special stages here are really great. I love the multiple playable characters, including Mighty and Ray for the DLC, and all the features packed into this game. And of course, you've got a great soundtrack. The best part of this game has to be the 4 original zones. They are very unique and creative, and it just makes me wish we had more. Like in a sequel, but it still hasn't been greenlit because Sega is such a backwards company. Which kinda brings me to the whole negative element of this game. For any attentive viewers, you may realize that this actually isn't my favorite 2D Sonic game. I kinda feel a little bad for doing this because it really is a stunning game and a very refined classic experience. It really is the better package to 3 and Knuckles, but I can't look past this. This is too much of a nostalgia pandering game that doesn't do enough original things, which includes nearly everything. The major points being the identical visuals and gameplay. This isn't like Generations, which remade these zones into 3D with completely modern and different gameplay. This is more or less a rehashing of really old zones and ideas, and it doesn't do enough new to warrant me calling this my favorite 2D Sonic game, no matter how close it is. Most of the zones here are stripped straight out of the classic games, and there are some really dull choices. I definitely blame Sega here, but really? Green Hill? Chemical Plant? Oil Ocean? And in general, something like this would have been incredible as a 32-bit era game, but these days, not so much considering it's a small-scale budget indie-developed pixel art game. Don't get me wrong or anything, this is an absolutely outstanding game for what it is, but the fact that a small external team of fans were able to make a better Sonic game than Sonic Team, and one of the best Sonic games of all time, is actually a really depressing thought when you stop to think about it for a second, but hey, let's move on. 5. Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Yes, I'm counting this as one game because that was how it's meant to originally release, and it is a superior way of experiencing this game. I just feel like 3 and Knuckles is a more complete package than Mania. Obviously got the originality aspect behind it, but the levels transition into one another more naturally, plus there's a more coherent plot here. Not that a single soul cares about the plot in 2D classic Sonic games, but whatever. I just feel like overall, this is just a much more impressive game. All of these zones and music and ideas are all original for the time, of course. And with that in mind, obviously it was split up into multiple parts, which works against it, but I do feel like this is a colossal improvement over 2. The sprites and animations here look great, the zone and act structure is really refined here with its bosses and level transitions. You've got Hyper Sonic, and Knuckles of course, a really fantastic collection of zones, which by the way I actually prefer this selection over Mania, because there's no Sonic 1 or 2 levels here. And of course you've got the absolute banging soundtrack, which is the only good Genesis Sonic soundtrack. However, there's one crucial flaw with this game. I understand this game had some development issues behind it, but even so, I really feel like Sega needed to do way more playtesting with this game before releasing it in the state they released it in. And what I'm referring to makes this game absolutely unplayable and borderline unbeatable. How are you supposed to get past this barrel? 4. Sonic Generations. Interestingly enough, going into this video, this was actually my number 1 game, or maybe 2, well whatever, but after thinking on it, I've decided to knock it down a few pegs, for a lot of reasons in fact. There's a really lackluster forgettable story here, and in general, this game as an overall package just doesn't feel like it has as much passion or ambition poured into it as previous Sonic games, nor does it really have many great new ideas or anything. You know, because of the anniversary collection nature of this game. This might sound a bit harsh, but similar to Mania, I don't really like the idea that one of the best Sonic games isn't really original nor new, and kinda just rehashes and reuses older zones and concepts. This game is also very short, and can really be beat in a couple hours. There's only 9 zones here split into 2 acts each, and the acts themselves are quite short. But here's the thing with this game, this is an absolutely fantastic game, and definitely one of the best Sonic games of all time. The classic acts here, while obviously not being the highlight of the game or anything, are still really fun. In fact, I kinda maybe prefer these over the actual classic ones. Maybe it's something to do with how fast they feel with the broken adventure style spin dash, or the modernized 3D visuals, but I do like the classic levels here a lot. But the thing that makes this game is definitely the modern acts. With the exception of Planet Wisp, which kinda sucks, and maybe Green Hill, every level here is amazing. The level design is so well crafted and polished, the levels are so expansive, for the Boost games at least, and there are so many branching routes and so many fun moments packed into every level here. Of course the visuals are really great, better than Forces, and I love the attention to detail and seeing all these older locations being modernized. To this day, I'll still boot up this game and play the first 8.5 levels every now and then, just because of how much I love them, even though it only takes like 10 minutes. The bosses here besides the final one are all really great, and I especially love Perfect Chaos. It's such a great remake. It's also really cool to see Egg Dragoon reworked for a speed level. And of course, the soundtrack here is really great. There's some outstanding rearrangements of songs here. 3. Sonic Unleashed. This was kinda a tough call for me to make, and even now I'm still a little on the fence with ranking this above Gens, but I've went with Unleashed for a massive reason. That being the larger scale of this game, I'd say Gens is more consistent in quality and probably even higher quality on average, but it's a short scale unoriginal game with a bad story. Unleashed, while being a little rough around the edges, has a much more expansive story with more grand ideas and a much larger scale. And it doesn't rely on nostalgia. And there's no classic Sonic. And yeah, obviously, Unleashed has way more content than Gens. There's a lot more levels and even DLC that I still haven't even gotten around to playing yet. There's also these hub worlds which I adore. They aren't the most extensive areas, but I find them very cozy, and I love all these charming NPCs and locations you can visit, plus all the miscellaneous side quests you can do. It really makes this world feel whole and very charming, unlike the quite literal, blank empty world of Gens. That was 2D. And overall, these hub worlds are the best the series has to offer. I'm on the fence with the gameplay personally. I feel like some of these levels lean a little too far into the running down laneways and dodging enemy attack sections for my liking, and generally I would argue that Generations has better level design, not to say Unleash has bad level design by any means. These levels are a lot more lengthy and a lot more challenging, and pretty much all of them are extremely fun to speedrun and race through and find the best routes. The boost gameplay here, as well as Gens, really shines, and it's why I want to argue that there is so much more potential for future boost games. I think it would be a shame to ditch the style just because it feels stale, when there's still so much more you could do with the formula. And here's the interesting thing about this game, I'm not just able to tolerate the Hedgehog levels, but I actually enjoy playing through them. They aren't as good as the daytime levels, of course, and the fact that it does take up a majority of this game is a major reason why I'm not 100% of putting this above Gens, but as a separate playstyle, I think it can be very fun. I think the combat can be genuinely fun, and there's a lot of cool combos and moves you can pull off, plus I actually really enjoy the platforming here. In fact, I think it's actually better than the mech and treasure hunting levels from SA2, and the speed levels here are better as well. I don't know why it's controversial to like Unleashed because of the Hedgehog, but not Adventure 2, even though it suffers the same playstyle issue. Both of the games have 1/3 speed gameplay and 2/3 other, both of which are much better in Unleashed. I know this might sound a little hypocritical after my breakdown with Shattered Crystal, but I never found an issue with the medals in this game. I never found it to be a recurring or massive problem. You'll probably only hit walls once or twice here, depending on how good you are at the game at least. But the thing is, replaying the levels are actually fun. This isn't like Shattered Crystal where I'm gritting my teeth reluctantly returning to the bad levels, because there are no bad levels, and I would have chosen to replay them anyway. Personally, I loved this game so much that I even platinumed it. And while it was very challenging, specifically the hot dog stands, and even more specifically the Eggman Land hot dog stand, I never got bored with this game. I had an absolute blast with it, both the daytime and the night levels, and if this were ever re-released on modern hardware, I would 100% again in a heartbeat. Well, if heartbeats lasted 30 plus hours, but you get the point. It's just weird because there are numerous Sonic games out there that I kinda just got tired of beating regularly, like Heroes and Shadow, but even after 100%ing this game, I could still play this any time of day. Oh, and I forgot to mention, this is my favorite Sonic soundtrack of all time. 2. Sonic Adventure. It sort of hurts my soul to think that the Sonic series kinda peaked with its first 3D game. I do think Adventure 2 did a great job of continuing the same standard, but every single following game, to this day including the boost games, have been so inconsistent in quality. It's depressing to think that there could have been a timeline where Sonic Team just continued to make games to the same level of quality, and with a similar formula of the adventure games. Think of where the series could have been at this point. Also, I have to say this, the Sonic franchise did not have a rough transition into 3D. Well, at least if you ignore the Saturn era, because yes, the first game, the very first 3D Sonic game, is the best 3D Sonic game, and the following two aren't that far behind either. Okay, let's actually discuss this game now. I'll start by saying the gameplay is at its absolute best here. I love the more free movement options and controls, and the larger environments really help with that, unlike SA2. Obviously you've got the spin dash, which is immeasurable fun to abuse across a lot of these levels, and I feel like this more open and free design is what I really wish we could see in a lot more Sonic games. I will admit, 06 isn't that far off, but pretty much every other 3D game are pretty hallway-y in design, so maybe it's something to look forward to in Frontiers. The Sonic levels here are the best, and in turn, Tails as well of course. All of these environments are super fun to speed through and platform around. And unlike SA2, I don't hate the multiple playstyles. Well, okay, I guess it's big, but it only takes like 20 minutes to do, so it's pretty negligible. Otherwise, all of the other characters are really fun. Knuckles is great. It's definitely more of a chill vibe compared to SA2, exploring locations you've already been to and the radar working for all the emerald shards at a time. Amy is a little slow and she could control better, but the level design is actually pretty fun and I love her hammer. And you've got Gammon, which is a really nice change of pace to the rest of the game because of its tone shift and theming of existentialism even. Unlike Tails and Eggman, his gameplay is fast and snappy and fun to play. In general, I love the structure of this game. It's similar to 06 definitely. I love having the 6 different episodes occurring side by side, giving slightly biased and different perspectives on the same overall events, and it all coming together in the end with the final story, which is one of my favourite boss fights in the series. I love the hub worlds. I assume it can get a little confusing at times for newcomers, but I just love the expansive environments to explore, and it really helps to enrich the world and its story. Plus it's pretty fun to find the collectibles and complete the missions in the DX version. Yeah, overall this is just a very fun game to play. I love the story, I love the gameplay, I love the structure, and the overworlds. I love this game a lot and it's one of my most replayed Sonic games for a reason. It's a shame that this has a stigma of being poorly aged because it's a very solid and well-made game, especially for its time, and I highly encourage you to play it if you haven't already. And finally, number 1. Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed. I'm sure absolutely no one is surprised to see this in number 1. It's a very obvious pick and I'm sure everyone else also shares the same opinion. Transformed is an utter masterpiece. Unlike every other game in the franchise, this is a flawless, perfect game. There is not a single bad element whatsoever. This game took the kinda bland generic kart racer of Sega All-Stars Racing and really evolved on the gameplay, in turn doing something really new and unique, which made it out to be one of the highest quality racing games of all time. The gameplay here is very, very satisfying. It's super fast paced, which is definitely one of the biggest reasons to why it stands out from the crowd of cereal box mascot kart racer games, and it kind of feels like a merging of kart racers and more arcadey racing games. It's very skill based and very satisfying to drift around the tracks. The items here, while being a very odd selection, are also pretty skill based, and of course you have the main mechanic of the game, the transformation. The car racing alone is already super fun, which is why I don't hate TSR, but this game also has boat racing, which feels more floaty but gives more opportunities for tricks, and the planes or flying, which makes it really fun to race through a lot of these tracks in a third dimension. You'd think it sounds pretty gimmicky, but honestly this dynamic gameplay elevates this game so far beyond, I'm gonna be real, every single other racing game I've ever played. And on the note of the dynamic gameplay, I have to mention the dynamic tracks. A lot of these tracks radically change per each lap, which gives a lot of variety and allows you to experience these locations in a lot more depth than a standard Mario Kart racetrack, especially with the transformation mechanic. A prime example of this is the Burning Depths course, which is a constantly flooding environment. The first lap is racing with a car and it's followed by racing with a boat, and as it constantly gets more claustrophobic. I also have to mention Ada's Lair and Rogue's Landing, where the tracks are destroyed on the third lap and you have to play through the rest with a plane. It's just so cool. It's not just the design here of the tracks that are outstanding, but it's the visuals too. There are a total of 17 new tracks here, all of which have stunning visuals, better than Forces, with so much detail to them. It's very similar to Generations in a way. All these great tracks range from so many different Sega properties, including Panzer Dragoon, Burning Rangers, Shinobi, Golden Axe, Outrun, just to mention a handful. A couple of these tracks also have unique commentary, such as Jet Set Radio and Burning Rangers, which really adds even more detail to these tracks. And of course, the soundtrack is brilliant. It consists of fantastic rearrangements of so many Sega songs, a lot of which are really deep cuts, and it leads to having one of my favourite Sonic soundtracks of all time. And it really helps to make these already masterful tracks even better somehow. And the content here is filled to the brim beyond just the tracks. There's so many characters here to choose as, it's a very crazy roster. You want to play as Danica Patrick, Wreck-It Ralph, Gogscast, well, this game has you covered. Not to mention the large selection of Sega characters to play as here, including my favourite, Ages, which is a Dreamcast VMU. You play as the Hornet from Daytona as a car, the plane is from Afterburner, and my favourite, the boat, is a Dreamcast controller, and the sound effects are the disc drive from the Dreamcast. I don't know how you could come up with a better racer. Of course, there's plenty of other modes such as Grand Prix, Battle Mode, Standard Racing of course, and Online, which people actually play. And of course the World Tour mode, which is a really great single player mode and includes a huge amount of fun missions to complete. Transformed may be a spin-off game, so maybe it's a little weird to be putting this as my favourite of the franchise, but no, I'm serious. This is easily my favourite Sonic game of all time. And that's it. I finally went through every Sonic game. This took a lot longer than I expected. So yeah, I have no idea how to end this video.